Are we live?
Now we are.
Okay. So I'd like to welcome everybody to the Tuesday, May 21st Committee of the Whole meeting here in City Hall. I'd like to acknowledge the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Kootenay, the Silks, and the Sinnix people, and is home to the Métis and many diverse Aboriginal persons. We honor their connection to the land and rivers and respect the importance of the environment to our strength as a community. Is there any late items, councillors? Seeing none, if I could have an adoption of the agenda as circulated, moved by Councillor Page, seconded by Councillor Woodward. All those in favor, and that carries. Thank you. Item number 5, adoption of previous minutes of the Committee of the Whole. We're looking at February the 20th and March the 19th. Did anybody note any errors or omissions? Moved by Councillor Woodward, seconded by Councillor Tate. All those in favor, and that carries. Oh, I thought we were going to do workshops first.
Workshops first.
Yeah, sorry. So we just passed the agenda, but I'm just going to move things around if you don't mind. We're going to have a workshop, and then we will have city manager reports and council reports, if everybody's okay with that, because we have staff here. So, Gabe, if you'd like to come up and lead us through the workshop educational session today on permissive tax exemptions. I believe we will be looking at some of these perhaps come the fall.
That's correct, Mayor. Just for the public or those that may not know me, my name is Gabe Bouvet, the city's manager of HR and regulatory services. So this would be more on the regulatory services side. Definitely not the HR side. And so, yes, it's my pleasure to be here today to just do a quick workshop on permissive tax exemptions, and I will just jump to this slide here to talk about the purpose of today's workshop. So as the mayor alluded to, we will be initiating the cycle for 2024. We didn't do this in 2023. We don't do it every year. It kind of depends on how the bylaw lines up. I believe we have a number of councillors that may not have undergone this cycle, at least not with the city of Nelson. So this seemed like a good opportunity to come and chat about, what you can expect from the cycle, what guides the process, and what will be asked of council when it does fall on your desk. So we'll just, again, do kind of a quick high-level overview. We'll talk about what are permissive tax exemptions, where do they come from, what's the legislative basis, what's the purpose of them, what do they accomplish, what properties are actually eligible for PTEs. We'll do a quick overview of the council's current policy. We'll take a quick look at the current bylaw that sets out which properties are currently receiving exemptions. We'll talk about the proposed timeline for the 2024 cycle. And then at the end, of course, we'll have an opportunity for council to ask questions or provide any input they'd like staff to consider as we start this process. So local government PTEs in British Columbia. Local governments have the authority to exempt eligible properties from property taxation for up to a 10-year period, and it needs to be done by bylaw. The source of that authority is found in the community charter. Permissive tax exemptions are different from statutory exemptions in that they're not automatic, so it is a decision of council. Obviously, with that power to grant a exemption also comes kind of the flip side. It creates a taxation shortfall. So there's a financial impact that needs to then be made up by other taxpayers. So we'll talk a little bit about what council's current policy says in terms of the guiding principles on the financial impact. So the purpose of PTEs, they can accomplish a number of different things. When you look at how some communities are using them, it would be to support certain nonprofit groups that are providing services that are meeting council's objectives, to encourage certain types of development that may benefit the community, or to provide additional exemptions to statutory tax exempted properties such as places of worship or churches that are receiving an automatic exemption on the actual land upon which the church is, but not on the ancillary lands, so like a parking lot or some bare lands. And I think if you look at council's current bylaw, you'd find examples of all of these. So for example, supporting nonprofit groups that are that are providing services, you might look at something like the Red Cross organization or Kootenay Kids. In terms of organizations that are doing certain types of development, you could look at the Kootenay Christian Foundation and the development there on Fall Street. In terms of that last category, there are additional exemptions. You could look to the local churches that are receiving PTEs currently. In terms of eligible properties, so again, council has the power to grant the exemption, but the properties still need to be eligible based on the legislation. So, typically these are going to fall under those first two bullet points for our community. So that's property owned or held by a charitable, philanthropic, or nonprofit corporation, or property owned by a local authority, in this case, that being the city. Examples of these that we'll see in all types of communities would include, a park or an athletic facility owned by a service club, art galleries or museums owned by a charitable organization, not-for-profit seniors or community housing, property located around a place of public worship, or municipal facilities and buildings which are being leased to community groups. So again, our current bylaw has examples of most of those. So that kind of answers some of the basics on what are PTEs and how are they being used in communities across British Columbia and the city of Nelson. Council has a PTE policy that also guides our own process. So at a high level, at the beginning of the policy, it talks about a priority to applications where project outcomes best align with the city's strategic planning goals and objectives. So again, that's kind of your very high level guiding principle. The policy also speaks to the process itself. So staff initiate the process by calling for applications and providing a notice to the public that we're accepting applications. We typically also contact those organizations that have historically been receiving exemptions to let them know, to make sure they're in the loop. We receive the applications and review them to make sure that they include everything that is requested in the application and that they're also eligible under the legislation. We then collect everything into a package and present it to council with a recommendation. Council then provides a bit of direction and staff returns with all of that prepared in a bylaw that could then be adopted in order to make sure that these are effective for the 2025 tax year. It would need to be adopted by October 31st. In terms of the guidelines in the policy on financial impact, the policy prescribes a financial cap equal to 0.5% of the tax levy for non-city owned property, and then another 0.5 for city owned property. So that's an overall annual target guideline of 1%. We'll look at kind of what that number was in 2022. Yes?
Just a quick question. So that means you would first calculate what the taxes would be and then make sure that it all falls under that cap? Is that what that means?
So you calculate, some of it's statutorily exempt, but you calculate how much taxes you would collect from those properties as a municipality.
Yeah.
And then if you exempted it, then this is what the total would be that you're foregoing, I suppose.
And has it ever come higher than that cap? And then you have to make weird choices?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, there's some that are not 100% exemptions. It's 50% for this or 75% for that. So there's some that are in the bylaw that are not 100%, just to try and keep it underneath that cap.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Chris makes a good point that I haven't mentioned yet. So you don't have to grant a 100% exemption. You can grant a partial exemption.
Thank you.
So beyond the financial impact, the policy which was attached to the materials provided to council, there's a number of sections there. I won't go too deep into any particular one, but under general criteria, there are 12 considerations that guide the award of PTEs, and some of them are pretty generic. So just, a requirement that the organization is adhering to the city bylaws, a requirement that they're eligible under the community charter. Others are more, are not just generic, but they may, for example, some of them say that there's a requirement that the organizations, have some volunteers in the public, or that they're providing a service that is open to everybody, that is not just open to a select group of people, so that type of thing. In terms of the section on applications, it just lays out the fundamentals on how are the applications submitted and what's the necessary content and what the deadlines are. The review process, again, sets out the process for staff to receive the applications and, again, sets out the timing structure for the different groups. So for those groups that are in city-owned properties, we have typically been doing a 10-year period, which is the maximum allowed under the legislation as to how long that exemption period could be, whereas for other organizations, we've been utilizing a 4-year period. The publication of the exemption intake, again, ensuring that we're publicly advertising the opportunity to the public. The notice of PTEs prior to the adoption, that's a legislative requirement, but it's also in council's policy. The policy also includes a requirement that groups acknowledge that they're receiving a PTE from the city. And finally, there's a section about accountability as it regards providing financial statements to the city. So that's kind of the policy in a nutshell. With regards to the current bylaw, it sets out the exemptions that are, and I know that this is quite small, but this is taken from the annual report. So the city provides that information in the annual report, and it's also in the bylaw. But the actual financial impact isn't set out in the bylaw, so I thought that maybe this would be a bit more effective. And what I can tell you is that in looking at that number from 2022, it amounted to $115,000 and change. So I believe that's approximately 1% of the total tax levy for 2022. So we were kind of right at that mark there that's prescribed by the policy.
So Gabe, just so you know, we never got the slides. I've just asked Sarah. I don't know whether or not she's got them.
Yeah.
She doesn't.
The properties are listed in the bylaw. Again, I just took a snapshot from the annual report. So it is public information, and apologies for not having the slides to you sooner.
It's fine. Just that,
Yeah, we'll send it out to you right now.
but we're gonna get it sent out, so yes.
Gabe, as far as like the Ascension Lutheran Church and the other churches on there, this is for the land outside of the building itself.
That's correct. Because the land that is, the church land is statutorily exempt, right? So these are the ancillary lands. That's correct.
So the footprint of the actual building is statutory exempt.
So again, this wasn't, the intent of the slide wasn't to
Oh, no, it's just that all of the slides, right? Because you raised some interesting points, and so we have the bylaw in our notes, but we don't have the rest of the slide package, so not a problem. Councillor Payne has a question.
I just want the distinction. So I do understand the statutory is the building and the rest, but the statutory is determined by the province?
Correct.
That's the part I wanted to confirm. Thank you.
Councillor Lockberg.
Do we, for triple net rent or nonprofits that are renting and have to pay that triple net, has there ever been an application for a PTE for their portion of the property tax that they're otherwise paying via triple net on the rent? You can't do that, right? Has there ever been an application like that?
For a tenant in one of our buildings?
No, in
Tenant in a private building.
the private buildings.
And they're not for profit?
Yeah, they're not for profit.
Anchors
Anchors is
would be
a
one,
good
right?
example.
Anchors.
And they're responsible for triple net, like
Yeah.
the property tax is just,
I don't believe you can do that.
you can't do
They
that.
don't own the building.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
have to own the building.
Yeah.
I beg to differ with Steph, sorry.
No, that's a good point.
Red Cross
Yes,
Loan
Red
Cupboard
Cross,
is
that's
a renter in there.
Yep.
And we've always had an agreement with the landlord there with the hopes that they would get some reduction or
Right.
compensation regarding, so we do have an example. It's something that, I mean, we took a long time to think about going down that road because you don't really know that whether or not that renter is getting the benefit, but I mean, that was part of the agreement that they had to.
They had to get that benefit.
Yeah, so the help, the Red Cross Loan Cupboard there that's in the mini mall. So, sorry, don't like to disagree with anybody, but
So then the fact that we don't know if they're getting the benefit, that leads to my question of, do we just get the financial statements when they apply, or do we get them annually? Because if we got them annually, we'd be able to see if there was a benefit, wouldn't we?
Yeah, we only ask for that at the application.
At application,
date,
that's
yeah.
what I thought. Okay.
And I think they probably do, but I mean, it's just, that was,
Yeah.
those were some of the
Yeah,
questions
I
that
agree.
are asked, because it becomes difficult to,
Right.
how do you monitor and how deep a dive do you want to take and how much staff time you're going to have running around for, it's, lots of things go into the thought process there, so.
And when a property is sold, do we get notified of that? Like, does the city get notified, like Kalen Hospice, did that not change hands?
Yeah, if it sells, and it no longer qualifies for a property tax exemption, BC assessment will have it show up as
Yeah.
taxable. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I think the other piece to understand on the exemption is once we exempt it, then all other property taxes are exempt, regional district taxes, hospital taxes, et cetera. So as soon as we exempt it, then it's not
We're
taxed
picking up the full amount.
anywhere, so.
The full bill.
But I guess on the regional district side, because they will, they pick up our assessment as the total for the service, then that's, it's paid elsewhere in the system, I guess. Somebody else is assessed, our assessment base shrinks, so yeah, they would tax, if we were whatever, 20% and we exempted 1%, then now we're only 19% of the assessment rate because you've shrunk that pool.
So those numbers in this slide that's up here are solely just the municipal
Correct.
portion of the taxes. So that isn't what we're remitting at the end of the day, so to speak, because that doesn't include RD or hospital or school.
You could essentially double that, I
Yeah.
guess, to come up with
Yeah,
an
to come up,
approximation.
yeah, that'd be
Yeah.
pretty close. So just when you're looking at those numbers, keep that in mind.
And yeah, that was from 2022.
Another question.
Councillor Mock, or
The Kootenay Christian Fellowship, is that $150? Is that line?
Yeah.
150?
It does appear to be that.
Yeah, so I think a lot of their building, some of them might be statutorily exempt because it's considered church. Some of it is like class 6 to business, so there's not that much that's left over. It's kind of like the other churches in a way.
So
for some of
Sharon
that
Nelson,
building.
for example, would be paying tax.
Correct, yeah, so those kind of for-profit, or not for-profit, but business type
business,
places,
yeah.
class 6 type properties would not qualify anyway.
Got it.
So most of that building is probably the church or business. Yeah.
Yeah, and probably for new counselors, information on the new affordable housing projects that were built. BC Housing or BC Assessment has to assess those on the subsidized rates of rental. So it's not, first of all, it's not taxed on what would be the fair market value of the building. It's on the fact that these will be subsidized rent, so the rental stream is less. That's how a commercial building is assessed, how much rent it generates. So they're already subsidized, and then council today chose instead to give a permissive exemption to take the taxes that we collect and put it in the housing fund. So instead of giving it to just that individual property, it was put in the housing fund to support other projects as opposed to just that individual project. For two considerations: one, it's already subsidized, and two, they get the funding from the province for those operating costs.
it's a bit tricky, that one.
Yeah.
I have heard parts of this before, so I get the general framework, but is there somewhere that I could read about it more in depth to get a better understanding going forward as we're looking at developing more of these types of projects?
I guess probably minutes of reports that were done.
You
at
could
the
look
time.
at minutes, you could also look at the provincial website on PTEs. So permissive tax exemptions, there's a section on the provincial website that would explain them in more detail. Are you looking for one specific
No,
to the city?
Okay, so I'm thinking of the Nelson
Yeah.
Cares Hall
Just
Street
thinking about
building.
that, because that's a
Okay.
bit different, the fact that
That,
we're doing
I
something
thought
with the
that
money.
was
It's not about the
negotiated in a
PTE,
different
it's-
way than a straight PTE. So am I mistaken?
No.
Okay, that's what I'm
They don't have a
interested in.
PTE.
Yeah, right.
The choice was not to have a PTE.
That's what I'm interested
Yep,
in, that
and-
particular building.
Yeah, and the taxes that we
I
receive.
would presume Lakeside over there.
Yeah, the taxes that we would, we did the same thing for Jim Reimer's building,
Yep.
and the three BC housing projects. So the taxes that we collect that are municipal taxes, obviously the regional district taxes, et cetera, have to be remitted to those parties. So that goes, so we take that tax we collect, and we put it in the housing fund.
Every year.
Yep, every year.
Yeah, because if the PTE had been on there, then the funding they received from BC Housing would just be lowered.
Yeah.
So it's not like that money's in the community anyway. So in order to kind of see the benefit here, then we charge the taxes and put it in a reserve fund to use
Okay.
for those purposes, yeah.
Councillor Lockhart.
So Chris, you said about Share Nelson that it doesn't qualify for PTE because it's a business?
Yes, some of the activities like that would not, so.
So if you look at, as a comparison, the difference between, say, that and Capitol Theatre, which is, I think all intents and purposes would be a business. It's all ticket pays. You can't get in there unless you're
building.
paying a ticket. I know it's our building, but I'm just trying to understand. Or
It's
then
up to
the
BCSS.
golf course, you can't. Like where,
It's up-
so it's just BC assessment has some
Well, it's the-
matrix that.
those rules that Gabe talked about. If it's recreation, you can. If it's, there's certain things that
Right.
are identified that can be exempt. So a nonprofit, like the golf course,
Yeah,
first of all, you had to be a nonprofit.
yep, yeah,
If it
yeah.
was private, you wouldn't be able to. If
sure.
they're a nonprofit, recreation has been identified as an area that PTEs can be applied to, so they fit. Whereas Nelson Shares,
Kind of a retail.
they're a nonprofit, but the retail aspect of their business is not identified as an exempt activity.
So just so I'm understanding then, we as a council are limited to what we can offer PTEs for based on the BC assessments criteria. In that case, even if we wanted to provide Share Nelson with the PTE, we could not.
Yeah, and it's not really,
Great.
I misspoke, it's not really, BC assessment applies the provincial
The
regulations.
provincial regulations,
Yeah.
right? Okay, thank you.
It's like we don't give positive women's apparel, doesn't get a
Yeah,
PTE, right?
no,
Yeah, so and they're kind of like in the share, and that is kind of the same when you look at their retail arm, right? Those
Yeah.
are sort of similar.
right, yeah. And the Capitol Theatre kind of sneaks by because it's our building.
Well,
Yeah.
no, and it's.
And it's a nonprofit.
Well, yeah, it's a nonprofit
And
for
culture,
sure, like that's
I
a given.
believe culture fits in.
Oh, culture kind of fits.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I saw in our bylaw, there's that thing about arts and
Yeah,
culture.
and then it also goes with the first line that Gabe had on the very first line about the fact that it goes with our sort of sustainability and our outlook on the city and our strategic plan, right?
Yeah, right.
So, Councillor Payne, you had a question.
I was just interested if there's any distinction with a social enterprise as opposed to no. And I'm, don't want to get called out on this, but I'm just curious. When I think of the curling club, it's not the statutory land thing, it's just the whole, it's just one of the larger numbers. That's what I'm trying to understand. Am I on the right line?
Yep.
City of
Yeah, there's
Nelson
this-
Curling Club.
Yeah.
18734, is that them?
Yeah, the land there has quite a high assessed value at the curling club, so the value of that is high. Yeah. I don't know how far out it goes. Maybe it includes quite a large parcel.
So that, the idea is then that the land is available for public good, for public use in some way? Or is it
Recreation.
part of the public use of the curling club itself? That's what I'm
Yes.
trying to understand. So the parking for the curling club, that's the public use. It's not available for other forms of usage.
Well, most of the value will be the building takes up the
Yeah,
majority of
okay,
the
so
land, right?
not the parking lot.
Parking
Okay,
is a
yeah, I'm just
small
trying to get it
portion.
clear in my head what,
Yeah.
some of the bigger numbers, what they, some make sense, and that's the one to me that I'm having a hard time figuring it out.
Yeah, and again, if it was a commercial business and, we don't ever challenge the valuation of our own properties
No.
because, we don't tax them, so some are just, depends when they choose to look at them, some they never look at, and, they have very low values, and you think, because I think the civic complex and the curling rink, you look at the civic complex as a whole, I don't think they've reassessed that forever, right? So.
Yeah, that's a good point. You don't really take advantage of that January window to dispute an assessment when, it's not taxable anyway. So it's just probably not something anybody's paid too much attention to or looked at, but yeah.
Just shifting back to the bylaw too, like the intention wasn't, to debate the merits of any particular eligible property. It was more just to highlight the fact that, these are brought to council in the form of a bylaw. That's how it needs to be adopted. What's significant to note for 2024 is that the 10-year group and the 4-year group are both expiring. So everything is, there's nothing when council deliberates for this cycle, there's no one that actually will have a PTE going into 2025 outside of what is being presented to council. So everything's up for grabs, or I don't know the best way to.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
we did a few PTEs that were only 2 years because of the
Yeah.
fact that it seemed to me that we were doing PTEs quite regularly, and because you don't get to see them all at once, it's hard to say that, you're gonna stop giving a PTE to Church X's parking lot when Church Y's parking lot was still exempt for another 2 years or whatever. I mean, so now with them all being in line, it's more work all at one time, but then at least you're comparing sort of a bit of apples with apples.
Yeah.
So, or at least round fruit with round fruit.
And so in focusing again on the process, kind of the planned cycle was to have this workshop to introduce the idea and get it on council's radar today. Typically, we'd make the applications available to applicants and notice that this is taking place at the end of June. We'd then have about a 4-week turnaround to receive the applications. Then, in terms of when we provide that package and recommendations to council, it'd probably be mid-August. I was looking at this date just before this, before sitting down here, and was thinking maybe we'd want to actually move that back to before council's August 20th meeting. That might provide a good opportunity for you to provide any feedback you have at that point in time. And then bringing the bylaw to council for first 3 readings in September, then advertising to the public before adoption, and then hopefully adopting at the October 8th regular meeting in advance of the October 31st deadline. So that's kind of the proposed cycle that we're working with right now. And again, we might just change that August date in terms of when we provide the memo with recommendations to council.
Councillor Lockenberg.
So I have 2 questions. The first one is related to 1.6, 1.5. Organizations that disparage others are not eligible for a permissive tax exemption. So what's the mechanism for evaluating disparagement? And how does that, has that ever showed up? If it does, because I look at that list and there's a few that are potentially at risk, I think.
Yeah, I can't say it's come up in previous cycles in my time here. I think, the current policy is from 20, well, it looks like there's some changes in 2021, but my sense is that's been in there for some time. And it's never come up in my time here. Maybe Kevin has some additional context.
So I guess to interpret that, we might say, like, if one of the permissive tax exemptees were to say something publicly about another group in the city, like, I'm just thinking there's some political speech that goes on that we wouldn't want to, you know, I've heard a few things disparaging the federal government, for example. Like, that's probably not something that would fit, but we don't really have any framework for evaluating that. It's probably complaint-driven, maybe.
Yeah, I think it was written in here that we expect, if we're going to give a permissive exemption, that you're a good community citizen, and so if you were, if there was racism or hate speech or any of those things that, was coming out of that organization, then council would not be providing a permissive exemption. So, no, we have never, I don't think it's ever come up, and we've never really kind of, I guess, put meat on those bones of exactly what that is. I think we thought at the time it, would be the human rights pieces, would be sort of the guiding
That makes sense.
document.
And I think then it would be a bit up to council to also bring those forward, because that's why there's 7 of us. We all travel in different circles, and so something might come up that the rest of us aren't privy to, and that could always be discussed in an in-camera meeting if necessary. But I think it's inherent that upon all of council, that if there is something there that does seem out of line, that it is brought forward in a timely method.
What's the bullet? Which bullet is that?
1.5.
Page 4.
Councillor Whitwood.
Thank you, Mayor. I mean, isn't the basis of this is that these organizations are actively helping our community move forward and be healthy, and that's an important part of this. So is that a criteria that we should look at everyone that gets this? We should say, do we look at that as a council? Say, is this group actively helping the community at large? Are they actively supporting the community? Are they doing something that is raising our community up? Or is it servicing just a very small grouping of people? Is that something that we're looking at?
Well, you can. I mean, the bylaw starts off by talking about the fact that it should be in alignment with our strategic plan, right?
Yeah.
So I can tell you, having sat through a number of PTE meetings over the years, it's been very much a discussion about, are these groups serving the community? And I'll just be honest, it's often fallen around the fact that there's statutory exemptions for churches, but we can't change that, right? So then the question comes up is, then do you not give some churches PTE for their parking lot, but you give other churches their PTE because they do more for the community? So I've been in discussions where, well, Church X just does myriads of stuff, and Church Y, we don't even know why they're here.
Right.
So, I mean, and that becomes a difficult decision to make, based on everybody has a right to choose the religion that they wish to follow, right? So, it's, in my mind, then it becomes down to an all or nothing if you want to change some of those PTEs. And the thing to keep in mind is that we don't have to give anybody a PTE. I mean, I'm not, we don't, there are communities, very few, that do not grant any PTEs.
Right.
So we don't have to grant anybody a PTE. And we know that there's the statutory ones, which also includes not only churches, but the hospital. We don't tax the hospital or the any provincial entities, I mean. But, so there is a list of statutory ones besides churches, but,
Right.
yeah.
Thank
So,
Thank you.
Councillor Awkward.
So another one is our aerodrome. It's not on the list in terms of a PTE, but it's kind of similar to the Capitol Theatre and Glacier Gymnastics. It's our property, but they're occupying it. So should we include them somehow?
I don't believe they've applied, at least not in my time here, so I think they would need to apply and council would need to make a decision and.
Well, I think the city of Nelson owns the aerodrome.
Yeah,
So it's,
in the same sense that we own the Capitol Theater and we have them listed, or we own
but we
Civic.
don't lease it
and-
to,
Sorry,
yeah, but we lease the Capitol Theater to a third party. We
Right.
don't lease the airport lands to a third party.
but we do lease it to the
But
pilots.
it's not
and
their,
the-
it's not the Pilots Association's lands, it's our lands, so, they don't determine who can land on there or not land on there, so it's
Right.
the city of Nelson Municipal Airport. We, all the hangars, et cetera, are taxed, they're private.
So
wouldn't-
they those
they wouldn't be
private
exempt.
hangars do pay.
It's
property
only
tax.
the,
Correct.
the one piece would be the terminal building or whatever. We do lease that to a third party, and I don't know if we've ever kind of considered that as a lease to a third party. I think we have an operating agreement
Yeah.
versus
No, they
leasing.
don't, yeah.
Yeah,
There's
so
no
we don't
long-term
lease,
lease there.
we don't lease the building to them. We have an operating agreement, what responsibilities they have to
Right.
manage the airport, so there's no, so the city property, all of it's the city property, there's,
Yeah.
the buildings they have on our property, they pay taxes for, but the aerodrome is the municipal, the Nelson Municipal Airport, it's not leased to a third party.
Right, so if I may, the way I'm trying to understand this then is, so BC Assessment looks at those hangars
Yep,
and that we get a property
just
tax.
like the boathouses, they pay taxes on the boathouses and, the
They pay-
buildings. Yep,
Yeah, okay, I actually didn't know that.
yeah,
That they pay property tax on the boathouses.
yep, correct.
And the parking lot?
The parking lot, yeah, that's a good one.
Boathouses for sure. Don't know about the parking lot.
Yeah,
Because they have exclusive
because we do
use.
lease
Yeah.
that property to them.
Yeah, yeah, not sure.
It might be like limited common property and they divide up that? It's kind of like a strata parking lot?
No,
I think it's, yeah.
no, we have a lease with the, well, no, the water lot. Yeah, so the parking lot area is city land. We lease it to the yacht club or whatever they're called. As that whole parcel. And it's, yeah, we just lease it to them and it's their rules to decide who can park there or not park there. So that's a good one to look into it, because we are basically leasing that to a third party.
Yeah. And the other thing is if we've just increased parking rates everywhere, I don't know how long the lease is, but that's, yeah.
Yeah, I think that was,
Sorry.
So many
Yeah,
things going
gotcha.
on down there, maybe needs to
Yep,
be revisited.
yep.
I
Councilor Page.
was, just prompted by Councillor Lautenberg's discussion on 1.5 and looking at that entire one section. I wonder if we're going to be revisiting this, if we could maybe consider condensing the number of bullet points. There seems to be some language redundant. I'm not really sure. The disparaging piece is really lifting a lot of work in that area in the first place. I'm sure we could capture it with fewer bullets. Just a tiny bit. You looking at this?
I don't think the intent is to change the bylaw
The policy.
or the policy.
Yeah, it wasn't the intent, but if council directed some changes,
Yeah.
wanted to clean up section 1 there, I think, that's something that we could do as we kind of initiate this process as well.
Yeah, if there's some substantive changes, I know our workload is pretty flat out, and so we really need to.
Fine with me
got
too.
that,
If it's
Focus
too
on it.
impactful, just going over it, I think it could be clearer and more concise.
Yeah.
But not a high priority.
So that was the last slide. I think we've already kind of entered into the discussion and questions phase. But again, the goal here was really just to get this on your radar and just to make sure that, the councilors that haven't gone through this are aware that this is coming, and to just provide that timeline and that overview.
slide, please? Thank you. The policy has the July 15th as applications due, just FYI.
Right.
Sorry.
I think on that one too, there probably is a bit of flexibility. I know the policy says July 15th, but, and we can definitely try to adhere to that. I would say the main deadline really is having that bylaw in place by October 31st. That's the legislative deadline. But I do understand council's policy says July 15th.
Maybe just something that could be omitted.
Yes.
The deadlines will be determined by council as needed to meet the provincial requirements.
Taking notes on that.
Councillor Lochner.
I don't remember if this was our discussion last year or previous year, but one thing we talked about was removing all PTEs and going to a grant process where we just took an X amount of, these are, remind me if I'm wrong, but I'm just going off memory here, but we did have a discussion about, getting rid of PTEs altogether, and then there's just a more of a grant process. I think the argument was that there's broader public good that exists outside of the kind of the PTE structure. Like again, like if you're a nonprofit that's renting a building and you're not, PTE isn't something that you even consider you have the ability to apply for, and yet you're doing a ton of work equal to somebody who is getting a PTE. I think if I just wanted to remind that because it was a fulsome discussion and I thought we were thinking of bringing it back. Nobody else remember that?
I like it.
I remember the discussion. I don't know if we made a commitment to.
I don't know if we.
The only, you leverage, PTs you leverage, so they're not paying the other taxes.
Yeah, that's a
You would
good
get
point.
half the value if you went to a grant process.
Great point. Maybe that's why we didn't go ahead.
Yeah, I think we discussed, I mean, I don't think that we didn't not discuss that, but we also were trying to get our heads wrapped around the concept of what we were doing with the social housing projects as well. I mean, we sort of had a number of changes coming all at once, plus the fact that we're going to try to line everybody up. So that's why we see these ones where there's some that have 2 years, 3 years, while we're trying to get everybody to run into being. So there was a lot on the table in terms of knowing, because when we did this last time, that they weren't even finished being built yet. They weren't occupied yet, right? Those social housing buildings. And so what were we going to do with that? So I think that we probably did have the discussion, and along with a lot of other things. And I think we've got a few things kind of cleared off that are going to be coming up for like this round. Yeah. But it does come the problem with if it's they're getting a little bit more because of the fact they're not having to pay that other tax as well.
It does seem that there's some inequity there, like for all of those nonprofits out there that are doing all this good work that don't get the same subsidy that these people do. But fair point, like leveraging that multiplier is pretty valuable.
Councillor Payne.
But it looks like they just haven't applied, because isn't that what, sorry, I lost it here. There is a spot there that in the case of the nonprofit organization seeking permissive tax exemption on private property, isn't that what Anchors would possibly, and other organizations like that, Red Cross, would be able to apply? So maybe they just haven't in the past. And now that we have a better understanding of that, we can advise them in some way to do that.
Yeah, and I mean, it all folds into is whether or not we want to continue a process of PTEs. I mean, like that's the other. I mean, it's a mechanism, but is it a mechanism that needs to continue? I must say I've asked enough times the government to reduce the statutory PTEs, but the statutory ones, but that had no movement over 20 years. So, but I will continue asking to have the removal for exemption for churches, but Councillor Payne.
Oh gosh, just lost it. It's interesting though when you add up the amounts that are going to communities of faith. It's not a significant number compared to the other numbers. My question though was, how many other communities? Like, is it 50% of the communities in BC that participate in this, or is it smaller? Is it
No, I
larger
think there's very
communities,
few
smaller
that don't do PTEs.
Very few that don't. Okay, that's what I wanted to get a
Yeah,
clear idea
there's
on.
very
So
few.
the larger communities do this as well. Okay, so that, because those become bigger numbers, I mean, the percentages
And the church ones
obviously
are
determined.
small because
They
of
are.
that we're basically excluding their parking lot. So if you don't have a parking lot, there is sort of no PTE exclusion, right?
Yeah.
There is some people have some pretty big parking lots, and I think we've
Yes.
also reduced them to like
Yes, they do.
50%, right? I mean, the whole thing is when I look at some of the churches, particularly in Fairview, that have really large lots, is that we're in a housing crisis.
Rosemont as
Perhaps
well.
those should be lands that have housing developments on them.
And that would be a community good.
Councillor Lockenberg.
I'm full of questions.
Gee, you are. You're just like, wear your name out.
Gabe, then for you, can you remind me again how, like, is there an equity principle here? Like, for example, if there's a PTE on this church's parking lot, but not that church's parking lot, because, like, remind me, do we make that call arbitrarily, and then what's the appeals process if some church is like, hey, they got a PTE for their parking lot, but why not us? So, does that work?
Yeah, and there may be some historical context there, but based on my understanding of the policy and, again, the legislative framework, council isn't held to some standard, some equity or fairness standard. I think council would have the discretion to award it to one organization and not another based on its own reasoning, as long as it lines up kind of with the principles that it's set out in its own policy. There's no legislative requirement that there's some equity principle, or there's no right to appeal that decision either, as far as I know.
Okay, great. That's really interesting.
Anybody else have any questions? See, it was worthwhile coming. I mean, when you said last week that this was going to be on the agenda, I thought this is good because it's good to get this out in front, and it's hard to say who might be new added to the list, which will, of course, then require some more conversation, and then whether or not we're happy with 50%, or do we look at continued reductions, which has also always been part of the conversation. Is like, some of these were always 100 and they've gone to 50. Did they go to 25?
Got it.
I mean, the sky's the limit in terms of looking at things. Councillor Payne.
So I know we're getting down to distinctions now, but I do know that Kootenay Kids Society does have do they just have the one building that they own now? But they rent in spaces. They have rental space as well, so they could possibly apply under that 0.1, whatever it was. So maybe that's a thing that they need some clarity around as well. Like how do we communicate to these organizations that there may be some nuances, or do they need to?
Yeah, let us just be clarified and be clear on that. As the mayor said, it's not the organization that's, you're exempting the property owner from paying taxes. How do they flow that through to the entity? As I think we just need to be clear on.
Yeah, so there have to be a benefit to the nonprofit.
I don't know what mechanism we have for the Red Cross of how we ensure that, but let us just maybe work on that before
No,
we.
I just
kinda
want to
get
make
out
sure
there.
that it's clear, because that is
Yeah.
an equity piece that I think is important for all of those organizations to understand and maximize the benefit providing due to the services they're providing.
Okay, and everybody's happy with the timeline. I think the timeline works really well. So, if it comes back to that August, we only have the one meeting in August, the one business meeting. So if it comes back to the August meeting, then we should be good to go. Yeah, we have quite a break there. So the August meeting might be long. So council, just be prepared that we might be starting the August 30th meeting at an earlier time frame, just to make sure we get through all the work that probably will get put onto that meeting. But yeah, I think the timeline works well then to not put too much pressure on staff in terms of getting the final things done to get them all in, so.
Sorry, can you go to the timeline again, please? Would you mind?
We've got it now, Kate, in email,
Got it in email.
that helps.
It's now in your email if you want to look at it, but he can, there you go.
The 30th is a Friday, and so you're talking about the September, is there a September 3rd meeting?
August,
I have a meeting on
sorry,
the
August
10th.
20th is our, sorry, now that I look at that date.
Yes, August 30th is, our deadline to get it to.
I mentioned that maybe we'd review that date, so maybe we could have it to council in time for their August.
Yeah, it's August the
20th
20th. Sorry, I was sort of thinking,
Yeah.
all I know that the date that it is ends in a 0,
Yeah.
so I wasn't paying too much attention there to the 3. My apologies. I'm thinking the August, if you could have it done for the August 20th meeting.
Yeah.
Would be great, and then your timeline flows really well.
Yeah, so I think we can work towards that.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Tate, for reading the numbers.
That's your specialty.
Yes. That's because I've just got them all in my head, so they kind of all get blurry to me after a bit, so. Any further questions for Gabe? Okay. Well, thank you very much, Gabe. I think everybody got a pretty good idea there, a nice refresher of PTE, and better to do it now than when you're trying to get through the PTEs, because it just adds another hour or more to the conversation, so we'll be able to dig right in when you come back.
Thanks for your time.
Yes, thank you. Okay, thank you, everybody, for allowing staff to do the workshop beforehand. And so now we have a bit of time for city manager. Do you have a report today?
Sure, I can raise a few items. We continue to work with BC Housing and have an upcoming meeting with the Ministry of Housing, their contact person who seems to be the liaison between BC Housing and sort of the ministry staff on, just the timelines on the new housing that's been looked at. So, and what do we do in the interim? There has to be some better solutions. So, continue to work on that. Obviously, we have our weekly meetings to, just to bring everybody together and work on the best solutions that we can find at this time. We had last week a emergency operations center exercise for our EOC. A number of staff attended that. I didn't. It sounded like it was really well received and was really well done. Still working with Scott Spencer on this arbitration we're going to with the water rights agreement with BC Hydro. That's scheduled for hearing in the beginning of June, so both Scott and I will go to Vancouver for that.
Sorry, pardon me, did you say water rights or water rates?
Rights agreement.
Rights.
Okay.
So that relates to the agreement where we get the extra water, and the dispute is when do we have to provide them with energy from the additional generation during freshet. So there's a clause in there that says it has to be a positive economic incentive to the city, and right now what has happened is we are selling power to BC Hydro at our incremental costs and buying it back from Fortis BC at wholesale rates. So it's a significant impact on our customers. Met with our development services team on the OCP and the work they're doing. They're reaching out to all the departments now on the policy work that they've done to see how that works on the ground. I did meet with the CAOs from Castlegar and Trail just to get an update of where they're at with, their housing, and shelter projects. And Trail is proceeding. They do have a contractor in place. They are working on that. There is no site selected at this stage for a permanent shelter or supportive housing, although they're working on that. Castlegar, I think both shelters, you heard that they were only funded for winter beds, and that has come to an end. So even though they had a working shelter, they have no money to operate it. So those folks are not in a shelter now. They're in the community. I think everyone's quite concerned about the fact that they were housed and they through whatever BC housing programs they have, they're now no longer housed. They're just out in the community. But in Castlegar, they have purchased a building. They are renovating that. So that's hopefully open for this winter season is the goal there. But again, no supportive housing has been identified for Castlegar at this stage.
Sorry, did you say that the city of Castlegar purchased a building or BC,
BC
Housing?
Housing did.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask.
Yeah.
Is it going?
Where's the location? I'm not sure where the location is.
And that's for shelter.
Just for
Yeah,
permanent
gotcha.
shelter, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We have always been the only community that had a permanent shelter, just so you're aware, for going back many years.
Yeah. And I
It used to be the only one between here and Calgary, actually.
Yeah.
Cranbrook now has, I believe, some beds. I don't know whether or not they're still remaining open. They're having some difficulties there. But we were the only community with shelter for many years. Councillor Payne.
And Castlegar has a designated encampment area, is that correct?
They, so they are, I think through a nonprofit, receiving some money for outreach. People are in various places in the community at this stage. They are looking through that outreach funding, whether they, establish a similar thing as they did last year. So they did allow, people to tent at a certain location, I think by the sports complex there last year. I don't think they've approved that yet, but I wasn't 100% certain where they're going with that one.
I thought they mentioned at the homelessness summit that they did have a designated spot, but I don't know if I heard it through city or through people with lived experience that there was a designated
Definitely last year.
area. They were talking about it this year, so that's why I'm confused, but that's easy enough to find out, so
Yeah.
I'll check into it. Thank you.
So that's where those communities are at, and as the mayor mentioned, Cranbrook is, I just heard through the news that they were trying to get a building permit to allow the go ahead of a permanent shelter there, but again, they do not have any supportive housing there either. So there's lots of work to still do on that regional side. The civic roof project, we are focusing on getting these contracts finalized, getting insurance in place, et cetera, et cetera. I had the chance to go walk through that addict last week, and it is a complex project. It is really, it's a really challenging project to design, really challenging project to deliver. But we have all the main tenders in place now. Just trying to finalize the contracts with them, but we have to basically expose all those trusses to the columns and basically strap steel to both sides of all those trusses. as you can imagine, there's electrical, mechanical, et cetera, that lay in that attic across all these trusses. You know, the construction back in the, you know, the 30s isn't at the same level as today. So even the, you know, the joists that run across each of those to each of those trusses that holds up the roof in those, in each of those spaces is just not, you know, has to be reinforced. So there's, you know, getting material in and out of that building is going to be challenging. Getting that material up into the roof, there's walls and stuff that we have to, you know, be able to cut through. If we need to jack those trusses up an inch or so, so we have to, you know, the it's on a, obviously a suspended cement slab, concrete slab, which is, you know, today's standard, that would be a minimum 8 inches of concrete. It's 4 inches. They sit on concrete beams, but so even like where scaffolding has to go, where shoring has to go, all those things have to be engineered, and you know, how you get material up there has to be engineered. So it's a super complex project. So for us to get it as far as it is right now has been a Herculean effort by our staff, which has certainly overwhelmed them, and you know, all these other projects that they're responsible for has, you know, have slid. So I'm taking a more active role in that project. We formed a oversight committee of staff to relieve some pressure on our front lines, well, our, you know, our Colin Innes's and Sam Ellison's, et cetera, so they can, you know, deal with some other larger projects that maybe Chris can talk about.
I have
Yes.
a question about that roof. Thank you through the chair. So it's a hot mess. But so the street's going to be blocked. There's going to be like cranes and.
That's one of the details that we're working through. Is there's been 3 or 4 different scenarios developed of how we create that lay down area for that, and how traffic moves, and all those sorts of things have to be.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
It's part of the complexity.
Yeah.
Okay. Lots of rumors in town about what's happening,
okay.
but nothing actually is confirmed yet.
No, we've done some various layouts, and we just have to figure out what's most practical. Our goal is to allow traffic to continue to move on both sides of the, you know, the boulevard on Vernon. You know, I drove by there today. You know, if you allow that, there's not a huge lay down area in front of that, but we'll see how that works. We're going to bring, you know, I don't know how many tons of steel, and you know, yeah, there's a lot of material. There's a lot of, you know, the only way it can get in that building is through the front of that building. So, so we are going to disrupt traffic. We are going to disrupt parking. That's just the reality of doing that project. So we're going to try to minimize it, but it will be disrupted for sure.
The trees are okay though.
Yes, we're not cutting down trees.
Tiny win.
Good to know.
Tiny win.
Yeah.
I'll take the wins. Thanks. Sorry.
So anyway, that's yeah. So that will yeah. So we'll look at, you know, how we best support that project. But like I said, we're in good shape. You know, the schedule is tight now. It's a lot that we're taking on there. So what else do I have here? Oh, just to let you know, just a reminder, we have the staff appreciation barbecue on Thursday down at the Rotting Gun Club, and
What time?
From 11 to 3.
11 to 3. So yeah, feel free to drop by and thank people for their work. We also are working with Selkirk College on a leadership workshop for all our staff that supervise any employees. So that will happen in June. And we're going to host that up at the golf club and stay in town. So we're not going anywhere with that. Yeah, I think those are the main things that I have on my list of, yeah, other than we're still working through a fair amount of, just with trying to bring 2087 and our local QP together on the transit, but I think it's other than trying to get that voted on by the members from, both bargaining units have to vote in favor of that for it to be voluntarily brought together. That doesn't happen. We have to make application as the city to bring them together. So that would be a much longer process if we have to do that. We have come to an agreement with the two locals of what that looks like. So we're hopeful that happens sooner than later. And obviously it causes a lot of HR things in between time because we're running two collective agreements with two benefit plans and two of everything. So we're working hard on that one. Yeah, so that's my update. Thank you.
Mr. Jury, do you have anything that you'd like to report financially?
Well, a couple things. So tax notices will be arriving in people's mailboxes this week. Now that we have a whole picture of, those other taxing agencies, the school tax, regional district, our own, we can sort of see what the overall impact is on someone's tax bill. And I think part of the education piece too, and we do have I think I mentioned this before, a large space blocked out in the Nelson Star, and we'll do some work with Ginger to promote and kind of inform people. But is that fact that, a lot of folks are going to have seen that their assessed values actually went down, so their taxes will still go up because on average folks' assessed values went down. But it's interesting, the school tax for residential here in School District 8 was only a 1.5% increase. So overall, I think folks will see sort of a 4% increase in that typical home, a 4% increase, which is, a little bit lower than probably I would have guessed based on, the other taxes that came in. Unfortunately, because the business tax or assessed values went up by quite a bit more, like 6.5%, some of that burden sort of shifts onto them. So they'll see a higher than average increase on theirs, unfortunately. But the residential is a little bit lower, and then the business is going to be a bit higher. That's just the way that kind of works for the other groups.
So when you say that, we're still kind of keeping the 75-25 split, it's still...
And we can do that with ours, but we don't
Can't
have the
do it with the
ability
rest
to
of
do
them.
that for regional district or school tax.
So it's actually the other taxes that are bumping it
Yes.
up. We've maintained what we say we will do at 75-25.
Yep.
It's the impact of the other taxing agencies that
Right.
are driving there. Is that okay?
And I should be clear on that. Yes, we
Yes,
maintained it
that's
so
very
the
important, because
increase
I'll be-
for
I'll be saying that-
residential and commercial for the City of Nelson taxes was the same, because we can adjust that multiplier.
Right.
But school and regional district have to use the provincial multiplier, which is fixed and has been fixed for quite some time at the same rate. So when assessed values go up more in one class than the other, that shifts the tax burden on those other groups
Just so
for
when we're
those
asked
other
that
taxes.
question. Yeah, because we will be asked that question.
Yep.
And it will be always that the City of Nelson
Mm-hmm.
put up the taxes more. But I think it's important for all of council to understand
Mm-hmm.
and be able to explain that to business owners that they know.
Yep.
Anything else?
Yep. And then on the transit front, a bit of an update that I don't know if I think we had BC Transit come and talk before about the UMO product. You remember UMO, which is the digital payments method? So that'll be having a soft launch in June. Existing fare products are still going to be good until the end of the year, but people will have the ability to use the digital payment method, either an app on their phone, or they can get a card and reload it. And anybody who had a kid in school who was riding the bus and you fear they're going to lose their bus pass, like this is a great product that will take away some of that anxiety of, you know, what if my kid loses his backpack? So BC Transit is coming here to do some kind of promotion for it. I think they're going to be at, I don't know the exact dates. It's in beginning of June, I think they're coming, but they'll be at a few kind of locations here in town to let people know about it and answer any questions they have. When I kind of get those dates down, I'll let you know, but they're doing a bit of a marketing campaign for the next few weeks on that.
Councillor Tate, Councillor Lockenberg, Councillor Payne.
It's so hard to get the bus passes because they're printed and you have to go to the right place at the right time, and hopefully they still have one for you. So BC Transit is going to build kiosks somewhere where you can reload?
Well, so you can come to, so a couple things. One, you don't even need a card. You could
Okay.
just have it on a phone if you wanted. You wouldn't even
Okay.
need that. If you don't want to have a phone and you just want to have the card, you can come to us or any place that you buy bus passes and just get the card, and you can reload that yourself at home, or you can go to those retailers and they'll reload it for you. But you can do it yourself at home. The card's got a number on the back of it. You can log online, say how much you want to put onto your card, punch in the kind of the serial number on that card, and then it loads it up for you. So next time you go and ride the bus, you can do that. So you don't have to worry about them running out of product or even leaving your house. You can just do it all from home.
So just so I'm just, before I go to Councillor Lockenberg and then Councillor Payne, this is like a Compass card.
Yes, that's
Thank you.
exactly what it is.
Whew, God.
For those who've been down to the coast, yes.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I have one in my wallet here, but I mean, it's like, okay, this is like, I finally caught up to technology.
Yep.
Okay, Councillor Lockenberg, then Councillor Payne.
So since parking rates went up in end of April, have we noticed or reported from bylaw officers any impacts on parking? I noticed today, parking down by the airport, completely full, or almost completely full, which I thought was a good sign. That more people,
It's always full.
like full.
Full. It's always full. Because you don't live in town, I drive down there a lot. Like, it's like always full. Like, when I've gone to regional district meetings in the past and, you go down there for the Thursday morning at 9:00, there is no parking there. Like, if you want to park along the fence, say to go to the RD meeting, it's not happening.
Okay, it's the first. I mean, I parked there quite a bit. And it's the first time where I actually couldn't, which was
Yeah.
good,
It's-
I guess.
It's,
But have we heard anything?
I haven't heard anything, so I guess we, like anecdotally, I could
Do we
mention-
get sort of monthly reports? I would think that's been almost a month. No,
I mean,
like in terms of like
Yeah.
receipts.
yeah,
Technically
revenues
should
we'd
be
know
double.
for how many people have plugged a meter, but as far as, like you say, people parking at the airport or in the parkade,
Okay, maybe
how full is it?
Simplifying it, just
Yeah.
revenue. Is there
Revenue for sure. Yeah, we
Yeah.
have that on coin.
looking good?
Counting the coin. I'd have to take a look over the last month or so, and then we'll have it on fines, of course. But you're more thinking about the parking revenue. So yeah, we can get that information for you and kind of compare it to last year. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just.
Yeah.
I thought it would be good to start to monitor that so we know.
maybe you could bring a report back next month, just for your, yeah.
And we will be bringing a bylaw change for parking to reflect new rules at the parkade. So that might be a good time to
Yeah.
just bring that as well.
I think that's coming, we put that on the agenda for next month, right?
I think so.
Yeah,
Yep.
it's, June, the
Yep.
June business meeting, so just remember to ask that question again, and hopefully in the meantime,
We'll have the information for
we'll
you.
have the information for you, for what it looks like at the beginning. And I have to say that I have found it no easier to park downtown than before. For all the people that said that there's just empty parking spots everywhere, somebody needs to tell me where they are, because I haven't yet found them. It's packed, as are the patios, which is good for business all around. Councillor Payne.
So the machines are on the buses that
Sure.
we're going to be able to scan my phone with?
Correct, yes,
Oh,
to read them.
I haven't seen them. I'm still putting my ticket in.
It's not up and running yet, so.
But they're on, I just haven't.
Oh, are they
seen
on
it.
there now?
Yeah.
I'm not sure if they're on, physically
Okay,
on there yet or not.
That's what I'm
Yeah.
saying.
Okay.
I haven't noticed them,
Yes.
and I just am trying to figure out whether I should buy more bus tickets with the 3 or 4 that I have left, or just wait for UMO. But guess I'll just have to gauge myself accordingly. But it will be communicated some way through the city's social media and press release, or will it be a soft launch that when you see it, you know to go onto the app and
Yeah,
add it?
both of those, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, it will be a soft launch. Like, we're not telling people, you know, you can't use your existing product. You continue to do that, so there'll be an overlap. But yeah, we'll work with BC Transit to get information out to people, and they're putting signs up at the bus stops as well.
The bus stop. Okay, that'll be enough then. I'll
Yep.
see that at the transit exchange. Perfect,
Yeah, and then,
thanks.
and if, when we get the big, long buses with the accordion in the middle, you know, you'll be able to get on in the back door, and that's one of the beauties of having the Compass card, is that you can get on the back door downtown Vancouver. You don't always have to come to the front door, because you can tap on the way in. I actually have some technology that I know how to use. And loading it up is easy. I've loaded up my card at home on the computer. Works great. But you can still lose them. So I just, like, and you said, like,
True.
you don't have to worry about losing them, but you still have to worry about losing them.
But
Well,
I
if it's on your
believe,
phone.
yeah, I believe if you make note of the number that's on there, you can cancel that number, and, you know,
Yeah.
if you lost it or something, right? So,
Just don't load it up with too much money at once, I guess, is the trick. Councillor Page.
Just remind me, and then at some point down this UMO path line is just tapping your debit or credit card, right? Like the readers will eventually get there.
you mean not your phone, but,
Yeah.
yeah.
They have that Vancouver.
Yeah, is that what you do? You
Yeah.
just tap your credit card? Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Just
And the
to know
Canada
it's part
line
of
for
it.
sure.
Sure, like
On
In
all
Canada
the-
line, I've
all
used
the
that when my
buses.
Compass,
Yeah,
I've
you just
I've
tap
gone to use
your
my
credit
Compass
I'm
card,
pretty
and I
sure
have to
when I
use that.
talked to Elise
The
about
UMO
it,
will do that as well? You just
Yeah.
tap your credit card?
I don't.
But maybe not at this.
Maybe
stage.
not at
Yeah,
this
heard
I
that
remember.
part,
I
but yeah.
remember distinctly asking about it and being
Yeah,
told
that's-
yes,
that's-
but
It took a long time in Vancouver with
might have taken
Compass.
a while. Yeah.
That took a long beta test, or whatever you guys in the tech world call it. The Compass card was around for a long time. It was many years before the tap the credit card business, but
The way
that
I-
also
Got
works.
it now.
The way I see my kids and stuff doing is they just, everything's on the phone. They're moving away from the credit cards and stuff too. They just pay for everything with their phone. You lose that phone. You can't do
Yeah, 'cause
anything.
the credit cards are loaded in the phone, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that's what I do too. But
Yeah, you just
the
Apple
convenience
Pay
is
or
just not
whatever.
an extra load.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
We're all so brave.
Okay, well, we're running the meeting out.
Is that it for you, Chris?
Yes, that's it.
So we'll go over to the other Chris and see if the general manager has anything you'd like to report tonight.
I'll be brief. So a couple things. One, a lot of questions about the pier out there. I'll just say that, you know, as city manager mentioned, there's been a lot of effort with the Civic to get us to where we are. You know, the rush on the Civic is really that hard deadline of snow falling, where we've had the messaging that, you know, this is something that needs to be done before the next snowfall. So that being said, on the pier, we've definitely seen a lot of progress in the last couple of weeks here, and we anticipate that to continue, both with the canopy being completed as well as our own forces getting in there and getting a lot of that landscaping done. Excited to, I think everyone's excited to get that project wrapped up. As well, another project that's been hanging out there, Salvation Army stairs, looking at the week of June 3rd for those to be installed. Has been, again, we've been pushing that one forward, but then the fabricator and there was some issues getting the stairs down, the actual stairs of that whole structure down to have them galvanized. So that was took a little longer than expected. As well, other projects, the transit exchange that we have on Victoria, continue to work with BC Transit on that, and you know our focus still is around kind of maximizing parking space while still getting functionality out of that transit exchange. So we've been working hard with them on that, and things are looking good and sort of fitting everything in. So we're just waiting to get 90%, and then I believe that's when they'll come back and present to council and sort of explain any of the changes that have been made there. On a couple operational things, camp cleanup at Government Road. That happened a couple of weeks ago now, I believe. So that looks really good. Actually went and did a bit of a walk through that area, and definitely a significant improvement from before. So that was positive as well. I just wanted to note, shout out to the crews that are out there working on them. I've had a lot of compliments on the fields. I think that Nelson's quite unique in that you have these playing fields that are right along the water that are absolutely gorgeous. And we just had the largest soccer tournament in Nelson's history, the Terry Walgren Invitational. And yeah, just rave reviews from lots of folks about the shape of the field. So to the crews that are maintaining those, good job. And then finally, also on the operational side, but tied to the issues that we had with our force main going through the river. So we have received information, an order from the ECCC, Environment and Climate Change Canada. So in this case, they gave us an order to come up with a plan for replacement, and then also that we have to report on progress on said plan every 6 months to them. So tough getting an order, never like that. The good news is we're already doing exactly that, which is we've been working on a plan for a couple of years now, actually. It started back with the wastewater master plan that was published in November of 22 that identified the need for this, and the start to do that is the liquid waste management plan, which we've been working on for a year now and will continue to. So, never a great thing to find ourselves in this position of getting an order, but in light of what we were already doing and had planned, it falls kind of directly in line with that. So,
Sorry, could you just say a bit slower what the order was?
It's two parts. First part is develop a replacement plan for the force main.
Okay.
And second part is to report on that starting at the end of this year and 6 months.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Page?
Yeah, I'm just curious if that helps us in any way unlock the opportunity to do that along the railway.
I think that does it help us unlock the opportunity to do it along the railway? I'm not sure. I think that there's still some discussion about what is the best route to go with it anyways.
Sure.
So, that is all through that liquid waste management plan. And that's one of the things that, we really tried to ensure that, ECCC understood that, this is all part of a larger project, which is the replacement or, significant upgrading replacement of our wastewater treatment plant. And through that, we're looking at the processes that we need, and then, how that is delivered to the plant and how best to get it there. So, I don't see how it, helps or hinders, to be honest.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Thank you.
That's all, yeah.
That's it? Okay. Got a few minutes, 8 minutes till the 6 o'clock. Councillors' reports. Councillor Lockwood.
I can be really quick. It's related to BC Transit. We have our West Kootenay Transit Committee this next week, but just a few previews because it'll be so long before I can report back on what's happening. The one thing that maybe Chris didn't mention that might be relevant is so BC Transit gets an update from the province on funding for expansion. And typically the way it's done in the past is that the province will do a bulk approval of the BC Transit's expansion requests, and those have been suspended since COVID. So there's been no service expansion at all. This is the first year that they've approved expansion, but rather than do the full recommended expansion, which for us would include 99, that's actually been denied. So we didn't get the funding to do expansion on 99. The only in our system approval we got was expansion on 98, which was critical certainly for students at Selkirk and Castlegar, even getting into town. That 98 is pretty important. However, transit staff with Tom Duell was able to do some reconfiguration, and it looks like we were able to get the increase or improvement in service at 99. So the 99 is actually getting a service upgrade with no additional buses. So that's, I should clarify what I mean by transit expansion is a new bus to provide for that service. 98 got a new bus, we didn't, but with reconfiguration, we did get upgraded service on 99. And those were the two, in our transit future services plan, those were the two critical routes. And close behind it, obviously, is number 10 and a few others, but it's not what we were hoping for, but it's something. And we're going to advocate pretty strongly, certainly at UBCM, for more, like, pretty critical. That's it.
Okay. Councillor Payne.
On May 8th at the Nelson Committee on Homelessness meeting, it was brought forward that we would be creating a task force to address the need to find a new location for the hub, and the first meeting for that will be on May 30th. I'll be participating in that. Same day, the Cultural Development Committee met, and I just wanted to let everyone know, I think we already got the invitation, but the opening for the Selkirk Indigenous Gathering Space, it's a public event, is on June 17th. I think it's 11 o'clock, but I don't have those, pretty sure it's 11 o'clock, but I don't have the timing, I don't have the exact clarification. And on May 9th, I did something fun with the police force. They were doing a training up at 10th Street campus of Selkirk, and volunteers were invited for any one of those 4 days to go up and be criminals. So it was my criminal experience, and learned a lot about, I don't know if anyone else has participated in that event, but learned a lot about how the police force works and the training that they, about what?
Picking locks, he said.
No, I learned no criminal behavior, except for the fact that I did crawl on my hands and knees a number of different times, and I got down on the ground and was handcuffed also a number of different times. The one thing that I did not know is that bear spray is definitely not something you should ever point at anyone. It is considered, there go the lights. An invitation. It's considered deadly force because through being bear sprayed, an officer can be incapacitated, which means that their weapon is at risk. So do not point anything at an officer. Is just the bottom line that I learned, and they are very accurate shots. Was the other thing I got paintballed a couple times, but it was well worthwhile. If you haven't done it, I would recommend it. I did learn a lot. May 11th was the first market of the season, the Mother's Day Garden Market. It was an incredibly beautiful day, really well attended, and they have expanded it to 2 full blocks, more like a full market in my opinion, with a small bit of garden starts, but certainly a fun event to go to if you needed some starts, and I did. I never actually need them, I just buy them because I see them, so I have more things in my garden than I had before. May 13th with Councillor Lochtenberg and Director Andrew Jancic from Development Services, I attended the Regional Transportation Summit that was hosted by the RDCK. It was a really awesome collaborative event because Interior Health was there, RDCK was there, the not-for-profits were there. Who am I missing?
RDCK staff, yeah.
Yeah, RDCK staff.
Selkirk College.
Selkirk College. So really, just one of those events where the more people that come together and are working on this challenge, whether it's transit or car sharing or parking or just the government coming in to provide bus service, interior,
Biking, the active transportation was
the active transportation, Interior Health and their Health Link, and how they can expand that to serve more people. And yeah, I thought it was a great event that will lead, I hope, to much more discussion around how we can work together on that. And then the last thing I'm going to report on is May 17th, I attended online the Climate Caucus held its annual summit entitled Beyond Talk Towards Action. So again, really great collaboration and the ability to break out into groups from individuals across the country in local governance who were talking about solutions. I had the opportunity to reconnect with Kate Leticia, the author of the Nelson Next Plan, who's now working for Community Energy Association, and just continuing on that good work. But again, really exciting always to be with a group of people that are so committed to the solutions and really bringing those forward in community. So that's what I'm up to. Thanks.
Councillor Woodward.
Just a small piece here. I did do the police training piece, and I got to be a dead person in a hallway, which was interesting. And then the police would come and like kick me to see if I was alive, and I wasn't. So then I'd keep moving on. And then I got to play also like a screaming hostage and like all these role playing, but I did want to say for the women and men in uniform, like it just gave me this incredible sense of being grateful that there are people willing to hurl themselves into these very dangerous situations. I mean, the training they're getting here gives them a little bit of insight, but I mean, most people will be running the other direction, and they're hurling themselves into it, to try to subdue a very dangerous situation. So I did feel this. I mean, I really said thank you to all of them when I left, and it is a very, very dangerous job, especially in this day and age where I think criminals are better armed than ever. And and then the training, I was a little surprised. Like the training is kind of military training. You could overhear the trainers, and many of them were ex-military. And so there is this military component, but at the same time, the world is somewhat of a dangerous place these days. So I'm really happy to see that our police force actually has this training. And they use the old Christian school building, which is, I think, going to get, because they were busting doors open with they were kicking doors down and such because they were getting that training too, because it's not being used. So yeah, it was a very interesting experience, and I was glad I was there. So,
Other councillors?
I'll do really quickly. There's not a whole lot to report from the regional district. A lot of procedural things. I think the best interest for this table is just receive the first kind of cost estimates and conceptual drawings for some expansion work that will be done up at Grove and Narrows. To facilitate everything from, I've mentioned this before, some expanded fleet management and mechanical services potentially, because there's a lot of vehicles in the RNCK that don't have a place to live. And also conceptually, as we follow the resource recovery plan, not necessarily having two locations right in Nelson to make Roman an actual core depot as opposed to a satellite depot it is now. Core depot is considered lakeside, whereas so there's multiple locations in the near facility for which to drop things up, and so expanding on Roman Narrows will allow more of those services to be concentrated up there.
Councillor Page, are they planning to buy more land at Grove and Narrows?
They're going to dig into the side of a hill and fill up another side of a hill, and there's some conceptual drawings from that joint resource recovery. So no.
And did you see were those plans available to the public at the last meeting?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll go look at that. That's interesting because, for 4 years I was told expansion at Grove and Narrows was not a possibility, and neighbors were complaining about what was already there. So very interesting that we can continue to look at moving there and perhaps getting the stuff off of our waterfront and moved to one joint location.
Yeah, we contracted out Ward Engineering in December to give us some conceptual earth moving and where those bids might go, or where we would take fill and what the cost would be, and so they finished that work and that came forward.
Well, it's 6:03, and I guess the only thing I want to report on, because I do have a couple of things, is I will just report out on the fact that I did on May the 17th have my first of what will no doubt be this summer, many of the provincial hazard updates that they invite mayors and regional district chairs to attend. And at that point so that was last Friday, 187 fires are burning in British Columbia. About 95 of those are holdovers. 85 of those are holdovers from 2023. The majority of even the holdover fires are in northeastern British Columbia. Drought conditions for us here in the southeast, we are only at level 1, so we're one of the least droughty areas in the province currently. Unfortunately, drought levels are 4 and 5 up in the northeastern British Columbia. So they, of course, have the first big forest fires of the year, and they are also in some spots there are actually level 5 drought already. Councillor Woodward.
Now, I did hear they did a lot of staffing up before this season, that there's actually like way more firefighters. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. I mean, BC Wildfire. So the thing that's lovely about this update is it's like 1 hour. It's very succinct, but you get to hear from sort of everybody. So it's introduced by the minister, and then we heard from BC Wildlife. We heard from the Ministry of Agriculture, which doesn't have as big an impact here as it does in the Caribou, but they're liaisons with cattle ranchers and such around drought. EMCR is involved. Walrus, and for Councillor Payne, Walrus is Water, Lands and Resource Stewardship. And so everybody has somebody from each of those service areas does a quick report out with the latest graphs. BC Wildfire has really improved their mapping this year. You can go in, you can take a deeper dive if you really want to see how big the footprints are and what's going on and what they're sending in for putting out the fires. And yes, like I said, they have expanded their crews and such for this year. So it's always an interesting meeting. So I can, if people are interested, I can let you know when they are. There is only one. I can't send out the invitation, so you'd have to come and join me when I have the next one. But I don't mind sharing it, and I've always tried to pass it along to whoever the acting mayor is at the time if I happen to not be available for the actual meeting, so that people can listen in. So at that, I'll leave it at that. I had a few other things, but I think that's sort of probably the most interesting part. And just to remind everybody that in the city of Nelson, watering is odd and even by address currently. So that's it. So if I could have a resolution to, Councillor Payne, you look like you needed to say something.
I thought it was Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Now I feel I must have been contravening, so I'll be odd and even now. Thank you. Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah.
I don't know why I had that in my head.
Sorry. It's okay. But recess, thank you. Councillor Weber, seconded by Councillor Page. All those in favor? Okay, and the food should hopefully be here. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be back at 7.
Like,
They were kind of along with the Catholic Church.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's interesting, but as Janice said, like when I look at those two churches up in Rosemont and the amount of land they have, I'm just thinking that would be a common good to provide that land on the long year lease or whatever you call it for housing projects. I wonder, maybe I'll just call them.
Sarah?
I can just call them, can't I? I'll just call the Church of
just
the
about
Latter-day
you.
Saints
Okay.
and see how they feel about building in the parking lot. I must know somebody who's there. You obviously know somebody, but
Yeah, but I just sort of thinking that just be careful in terms of like, I would maybe see if somebody that you knew
yeah,
could call them.
yeah. We're live, okay.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. It's 7 o'clock and we'll get on with the next part of the meeting. If I could have a motion to reconvene, please. Counselor Tate, seconded by Counselor Woodward. All those in favor? And that carries. This evening, we have no cultural presentation. The media did offer to do something, but we're not going to hold the media in the room to tonight's cultural
You
presentation.
sing, Bill?
And dances.
I'm gonna do a song and dance thing.
Yeah.
Jenna, you really want to.
I think maybe this situation she can be overruled.
Yeah,
Gatekeeping.
2/3 of council.
yeah, well, yes, you can overrule me, that's for sure. The item 11, public participation. I see no guests in the room because Lisa will be, is doing our presentation from WildSite later on this evening. So we're moving on right away to item number 12. So Claire is coming in remotely for us. Claire Payton of the Kootenay Lake Partnership will provide a presentation to council on an overview of the partnership and their connection to the city of Nelson. So welcome, Claire. And we're all here, and yeah, so I'll just turn it right over to you if you're good with that. And maybe we will hold off questions to the end. Is that your preference, or how would you like that to run for you?
How much time total do we have together, just so I make sure to honor that?
I think it's about 20 minutes.
10 minutes for
Okay.
presentation.
So I just have a really brief presentation, so if you have questions, feel free to interject.
Oh, okay, okay. We'll see how it goes here. I'll monitor the room, and anyways, over to you. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. So my name's Claire Payton. I am very passionate about Kootenay Lake. I coordinate the Kootenay Lake Partnership. I am an environmental scientist and a professional agrologist. And I coordinate the partnership, and I worked with Jesse a long time ago. I was one of the founders of Friends of Kootenay Lake, which was run through Jesse's group at that time. So yeah, anyways, I've been working on Kootenay Lake for, since 2012, and I'm very passionate about it. So thank you for having me today. Do you mind just from your end allowing me to share my screen, and I'll start my presentation?
That's fine. Is that okay, Sarah?
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
So while we're getting the presentation going here, I'm just waiting for the invite to share. You guys have someone there that will send me the...
No, I think Claire, you just need to share. There's a share button.
Oh, there we go. Okay, we're good. Okay. Okay. So, can you guys see my presentation?
No, what we can see is council, and we can't see your
Okay. Bear with me here.
Yeah,
We'll get
no
this
problem.
very
No
good.
problem.
Okay, this should work. Okay, so let's try this again. Can you guys see my presentation now?
No.
No, we see your Chrome window, or your Firefox, or whatever it is.
It was working a second ago. Is there someone there on the back end? Because we just tested this and it worked.
Okay, hang on 1 second.
Well, I'll just try the different option here. Okay, bear with me. Thanks for your patience. Does this work? Can you guys see it now?
No.
Nope.
No.
Okay.
Claire, can you go to one of the top, share your screen again, like you were just doing?
Yeah.
And is the presentation in one of the tabs along the top? So
No, because it's not on the internet. It's on PowerPoint.
Pull it
You're
up.
running from the internet. Yeah. So you can't reach out your browser. That's why you're only sharing your browsers. You can't get past it.
Oh, because
Okay.
you're on.
Because you
Okay.
need the web app.
So I will share it then.
But bear with me here, guys. I got this. I just sent it to your team earlier today. So I could just probably stream it through online. So if you give me a second here, I should be able to work with that. Okay, we'll get this. Sorry about this, guys. I'm not used to using WebEx. Okay, here we go. Boom.
You got it?
Entire screen. Allow. Okay, can you guys see it now?
No, we're just seeing your
Sarah, can you
browser.
run it from our end? Good. So Sarah can run it, Claire, Sarah can run it from our end. And we'll just try to hopefully keep
Sure.
pace with what you're talking about to know to advance the slides.
If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. I mean, the main things I want to chat to you guys is more verbal anyways. I just put a bunch of pretty pictures and stuff on the PowerPoint. So do you guys want to try play it from your back end? And if we can't get it in like 2 minutes, I'll just chat
Sure.
with you
It
guys.
should be,
Just click allow. Because isn't that saying?
is it, what does it say?
I think it
Can't
says.
see it on.
I can't see it. Because I think I can go,
That's funny. We just tested this before the meeting.
hang on a second.
Well, I'll just say it's nice to see you, Claire. It's Jesse.
Hi, Jesse.
Hi.
It's nice to see you too.
Yes, hello.
You know what? Let's just proceed without that while they're getting that loaded up. I don't want to waste your time because I know it's been a long day for you guys. So basically just hoping to chat with you guys about who's the Kootenay Lake Partnership, you know, what's the importance of the city of Nelson's waterfront. You guys have been redoing your OCP, so potential link with the OCP, and then just wanted to propose a future opportunity. So the Kootenay Lake Partnership was formed in 2010. It was really formed by DFO and the Tnaha got together because they were really concerned over the rapid rate of shoreline development. And they didn't feel like they could protect the values of Kootenay Lake, protect the indigenous values with this rapid rate of shoreline development. So the Kootenay Lake Partnership was born. One of the key things the Kootenay Lake Partnership has done, which probably some of your planning staff is familiar with, is something called the Shoreline Guidance Document. Man, I wish I could share this one slide with you.
We've got the
We've
slides coming
got,
up.
we've got them now.
Sure.
We're almost
we're
there.
close.
We're almost
Claire.
there.
Just.
We're one with the osprey and a marmot.
Okay, perfect. So that's a baby beaver.
Oh, yeah,
Sorry.
I was gonna say.
So yeah.
Okay, baby
and-
beaver.
Okay.
Okay.
You know, obviously, many of you are familiar with how incredible Kootenay Lake is and all the wildlife that it supports. So, you know, the reason I do what I do and many people who work on Kootenay Lake do what they do is because they're passionate about the lake. That's a picture of some kokanee. So if you forward to the next, forward to another slide, next slide. Okay, so this one is a lot of words, but basically the shoreline guidance document is really our kind of keystone project. And what it does is it takes 3 pieces and puts them together. It takes a cultural values study around the entire lake, shoreline ecological values, and that's all around the lake, and then indigenous cultural values study. So archaeological, ecological, and cultural, indigenous cultural values, and it basically rolls them all up into a way. So when, let's say, the city of Nelson gets a proposal to build a dock along the shoreline, what this does is it gives decision makers a common understanding of what the values are so that they can guide development on the lake in a way that protects those values. So let's say, if you forward to the next slide, actually. So this is partly why the Kootenay Lake Partnership was established, is because shoreline development and work along the shoreline is very complex. So you see in this diagram, from the uplands to the high water mark, that's regional district or municipal jurisdiction. And then high water mark down to the water is provincial jurisdiction. And then the water
is federal.
Federal jurisdiction. And so because you have these complex jurisdictional pieces, that's really kind of why the partnership exists, is because we all sit around a table and troubleshoot some of these really complex challenges to dealing with managing the shoreline along Kootenay Lake. So this is just, I just wanted to lay that out for you in terms of like, it's really part of the key purpose of the partnership is to kind of unravel that complexity. So if you go to the next slide, please. So this is kind of like how the shoreline guidance document hits the ground is the divided up Kootenay Lake into these segments, and each segment is ranked in terms of what I said, the archaeological values, the ecological values, and the indigenous cultural values. And what it does is it gives anybody, whether it's municipal, federal, indigenous, provincial, common ground to make decisions on should this development go through. If it does, what are the ways that it can be done to kind of protect those values? Okay, if you go to the next slide. Sorry if that is maybe not the most concise way to explain it. It's kind of complex, and it's late in the day, so I'm maybe not as articulate as normal, but it's really kind of the key piece that Kootenay Lake Partnership has achieved over the years, because with the rapid rate of development comes a lot of referrals. And every single referral that comes through has to use these shoreline guidance documents. So it's really been a huge thing. And Kootenay Lake has really been a leader in how to integrate Indigenous cultural values into decision making. And so I'm sure working in local government, you guys are very familiar with the United Nations Declaration of Rights of Indigenous People. And so UNDRIP and then the act that has come through BC is very much connected to the work that the Kootenay Lake Partnership is doing. And the shoreline guidance document is just part of how Indigenous interests are being protected on the lake. So this is a picture of your incredible waterfront that you guys are stewards of. And so if you flip to the next slide, I call this Nelson's crown jewel. And I know that there's a bit of a movement afoot in terms of restoring Cottonwood Creek and stuff. And I wish I had my pointer and I would point out a few things. But in the kind of bottom left-hand corner of the slide, I just kind of wanted to plant a seed with you guys that, you know, in the top kind of corner is the works yard and stuff, but in the bottom corner, in the bottom left corner, there's a large section of essentially wild waterfront, and it's the only kind of natural, untouched waterfront that doesn't have many people visiting it in the city of Nelson kind of boundaries. And so I have always seen this for the last decade. I've always seen this as a huge opportunity. I believe that's CP or CN Rail property down there. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
CP.
And so pardon me?
It's CP. It's
CP Rail.
yeah.
And so I see that, just wanted to throw it out there to you guys that if you guys ever wanted to chat with someone about potentially working with CP Rail on creating a bit of a nature reserve there, no people allowed, kind of put one part of the city of Nelson's shoreline dedicated to nature, that would be the place. And CP Rail often has big money to do off-site offsets. So there's big money in there and they could fund the whole thing. So anyways, that's a dream I've had. I just wanted to throw it out to you guys. And especially because I know Cottonwood Creek, which you kind of see streaming through in the top of the slide. I know there's a movement afoot to do some restoration there. So it's kind of in the tributary area of that. So if you go to the next slide, please. Okay, so Natalie Andrzejanic with your planning department is the City of Nelson representative on the Kootenay Lake Partnership. And so through your official community planning process, I went and presented to your planning group. And we kind of determined that a couple potential links with the City of Nelson and the Kootenay Lake Partnership Shoreline Guidance Document is to require qualified environmental professionals to use the shoreline guidance document for riparian assessment within the City of Nelson boundaries. And that any development proposals must be assessed using the shoreline guidance document. There is also a movement afoot, has been a movement afoot for many years now to establish a 30-meter development permit area around the entirety of Kootenay Lake. So I just kind of wanted to connect the dots on like, what does this mean for the City of Nelson? Because as you know, a lot of the City of Nelson is already developed, the shoreline. So these are just a few links on what it could be done in the future. You know, many of your residents live in Nelson, and many tourists come to the area because of Kootenay Lake and because of how incredible it is. And so making sure that we keep Kootenay Lake and we steward it in such a way that can maintain, you know, so people can throw a line in the water and catch a fish and maintain indigenous values, all that kind of good stuff. That's really why we do what we do. And so if you want to flip it to the next slide, please. Our working with Natalie, our intent is to submit a proposal to you guys for $2,000 this year to support Kootenay Lake Partnership's work. So we're getting money. We get a $10,000 annual contribution from RDCK. So we're just reaching out to other partnership agencies to see if they will contribute towards the work we're doing. So that it's my understanding that this is not the place to submit the proposal, but we'll do it after the fact. But I just wanted to kind of mention it, that that's our intention, and that if you guys have any questions, I'm like happy to answer any questions. And that's the end of my presentation. So if you guys have any questions around Kootenay Lake or management or anything, feel free just to ask away.
Councillor Woodward, then Councillor Page. Councillor Woodward.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Claire.
Thanks, Jesse.
So I am curious, like there is a lot of development happening on the lake shore and a lot of docks and changing of the lake shore with making beaches and creating wave breaks with rocks and really transforming the local landscape here. What's your feeling on that? I mean, who because you have these three jurisdictions, so who's in control of, like, you know, you can't actually completely change your lakefront and to make a nice swimming area and destroy fish habitat, or I mean, who's in control of that, or is there anybody in control of that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. So that is kind of our key focus as a partnership. So the shoreline guidance document can only go so far. A lot of it comes down, some of the works that are happening are illegal, and there's not a lot of compliance and enforcement presence on the lake. So in response to that, the Kootenay Lake Partnership has established a compliance and enforcement committee that represents federal, provincial, and regional compliance and enforcement staff. And we get together quarterly to determine how we can better leverage resources to have a bigger presence on the lake. Another piece of it is shoreline homeowners simply not knowing the rules and regulations. And so now that Friends of Kootenay Lake is on hiatus and not functioning, that used to be a key part of what they did. So we may end up either trying to reinvigorate Friends of Kootenay Lake and get them started again, or take on some landowner outreach. Another big piece is, like, so just so you guys know, from like a systematic cumulative effects piece, they did a shoreline inventory a decade ago, and then they just redid it in 2021. And what they found was, over a 10-year period, 4.5 kilometers along the shore of Kootenay Lake has been degraded. So even with the shoreline guidance document in place, we're still experiencing rapid shoreline loss. And so that is part of why we've been working hard. The regional district has been working hard to set in place this environmental development permit area, which would be a 30-meter area where you wouldn't be able to say no to development, but you would just be able to have a little bit more control on what happens where. From an Indigenous priorities perspective, the Ktunaxa are extremely concerned about this. So yeah, and like as you are probably well aware, fish stocks in Kootenay Lake have been a disaster for the last number of years. Fish health is very connected to shoreline health, which is very connected to how we're managing development on the lake. So these are the kind of like magnitude of issues and complexity of issues the Kootenay Lake Partnership is trying to, or not trying to, but that we are working towards. So yeah, Jesse, kind of long answer long, is we're trying to tackle that through those different pieces, through like the shoreline guidance document, through landowner outreach, through inventories on understanding what is being lost. And then, yeah, so it's definitely a multi-pronged approach.
Thank you, Claire.
Councillor Page.
Thank you. Claire, since the organization was established back in 2010, the partnerships indigenously in the area have changed. And I'm wondering what your group's plan is to include the Sinixt in the planning process going forward.
Yeah, it's a really good question. The Sinixt Confederacy has reached out to me regarding participation in the partnership, and my response was, if they want to be a part of it, they have to send a letter requesting their participation, and then from there it goes to the partnership for their decision. My sense is that the partnership was created as a platform for the Ktunaxa to make sure that their rights and title within their traditional territory on Kootenay Lake is being upheld, and that they have a say in how it's being managed. That's very much connected to the Declaration Act action plan. But it's a really good question. To be determined is the short answer. But my feeling is that there will be separate tables for each of the Indigenous nations. Sometimes people are like, well, it's more efficient if everybody sits together, right? But I think something that we all have to appreciate is there's a lot of complexities when we're bringing different nations who have essentially been pitted against each other for, determining whose territory is where, and kind of being stuck in this colonialistic box. So it's very complex, and it may not be the most efficient way forward to have two different kind of groups dealing with Indigenous rights and title kind of issues on Kootenay Lake, but we'll see where it goes. They haven't submitted a letter requesting participation yet, so the idea is if they do that, we'll submit it to the partnership, and then they will decide if they want to invite other nations to be at the table.
Okay, thanks.
Great question.
For sure.
You stole my question, Councillor Page. Claire, I just want to go back to the sort of around the question that Councillor Woodward asked, and that is, so, I mean, we all know, or we should know, that making a beachfront is an illegal process in British Columbia, that you can't alter that foreshore like that. And because it is illegal, for those that, we don't have that much development on the stretch that's in Nelson, but I'm thinking that out in the regional district, is there bylaw? So if I see my neighbor hauling in trucks of sand to dump in his front yard, is there not like a bylaw process like we would have here in the city, where we would have a bylaw for doing something that's illegal? Is there not? Does the regional district have these bylaws, or is this a case of having to well, and because of like the nice diagram that you showed us there about this is RD, this is provincial, and then, you know, then you have DFO or the federal government. Is there a way that I can report my neighbor?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like the quick and easy answer is the RAP line, so the report all polluters and poachers
Oh,
line.
okay.
So that's a provincial line. And what it does is, you know, some people aren't sure, is this whose jurisdiction is this? So it's just kind of a one-stop shop. If you have any concerns about development on the shoreline, you call the RAP line. And, you know, I can easily bring that up for you guys. And then from there, it basically gets referred to a conservation officer or natural resource officer. And then from there, they'll go and inspect. So a lot of the provincial jurisdiction is really where a lot of the infractions are taking place in terms of what you guys are talking about, in terms of removing vegetation, importing sand, all that kind of good stuff. And so what happens is most of the compliance and enforcement in the provincial realm is response-based only. So they're not going out there and actively inspecting and checking things as they're happening. They're a complaint-based agency, where the Tanaha have a fisheries guardian that is probably the person with compliance and enforcement that is out on the lake the most, and he is out there catching things as they're happening. But obviously catching things before the damage is done, like early on, is best, because oftentimes what happens is the damage is done and then the agencies responsible may not feel it's in their interest to go through the huge legal process to press charges. One new tool that is being used fairly extensively by the province is something called a habitat restoration order. So if you're somebody on the shoreline, you've done something illegal, you've, let's say, nuked the trees along your shoreline, the province can issue something called a habitat remediation order, in which you have to restore it. Is it ever restored to what it was before? You know, it takes a long time to grow a 100-year-old tree. So there is always a loss in my mind. That's just my personal opinion. But slapping someone with a $200-300 fine, sometimes people just feel that's the price of getting what they want. Whereas the habitat remediation order is way more extensive and way more costly for the landowner. So, but, you know, a lot of people do want to do the right thing. A lot of people don't know what is right. They just see what their neighbors have done and they're like, oh, I want that. And so I think that reaching out to landowners and really like informing them, not only about like what is legal and what is not, but also just inspiring them that to be stewards of the shoreline, that this is an amazing place and that individual impacts do have, you know, cumulative impacts. So I think just connecting the dots with that is really important, because, you know, we're seeing to this day, even with the shoreline guidance document in place, we're still seeing rapid shoreline degradation. So we're really putting our heads together with all these agencies to figure out, okay, well, what else can we do?
So just to follow up on that, so thank you for that. I never realized that RAP was the agency to contact sort of for a complaint, just like we do with the bylaw here. Bylaws here are all complaint driven. We don't sort of drive around and figure out whether or not well, we have in some years, whether or not you're watering on the wrong day, but I mean, basically it's usually a complaint driven process. So I never realized that RAP was the agency to phone, so that's a good piece of information. The Kootenay Lake Shoreline Guidance document, so this document, my question is, if I'm, you know, just bought my retirement property out at 12 Mile and, you know, I'm building my house, can you tell me, does the Regional District of Central Kootenay, does their planning department, when I'm going in and taking in my plans for approval and such, because I'm a shoreline property, are they handing me the Kootenay Lake Shoreline Guidance document? Or are they even telling me that, or are they just going, okay, well, yeah, you built your house the required 50 meters up from the shoreline, have at it, right? Without any consideration for the fact that I might cut down every tree that's in front of my 50 meters because I want to have a view of the lake. Like, is that part of the process of information that I am getting? Like, I'm wondering how this information gets disseminated, because like I live up a hill, so it's like I don't have a Kootenay Lake Shoreline Guidance document unless we get a really bad flood. Like, is this given out? How do people get this and know that maybe they should have this education?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question. The RDCK planning staff, like, they use the shoreline guidance document on the daily. So it is very integrated into the decisions happening at the planning department with the RDCK. In terms of, like, the intention of the shoreline guidance document was really made to make sure that all the decision makers, whether it's municipal, provincial, or federal, or indigenous, are all working off the same playbook to make the decisions, and that everybody has all the key information relevant to make those decisions. So places with high values, you may not allow certain types of development, so that kind of decision. In terms of actually how it gets down to the shoreline property owners, we have an interactive web map where they can, it's through the RDCK mapping, so you can look at the City of Nelson waterfront through our interactive web map and see all the layers to those surveys that I was talking about. So it's publicly accessible. Basically, because the process is so complex, when you want to build a dock, when you want to, have a building that may be within that foreshore area, it's very complex. So oftentimes our message to shoreline property owners is call Front Counter BC. But one issue is that Front Counter BC has had so much staff turnover that they are like in struggle town right now, trying to give out the right information. So that is another challenge that we are addressing. The plan is for me to provide some training to Front Counter BC, because that really is the one-stop shop for anyone wanting to do development on Kootenay Lake. No matter what you want to do, you have to go through Front Counter BC in terms of any work along the foreshore. So yeah, it's tough. I mean, we could definitely do a better job at getting this into the hands of the shoreline homeowners, but at the end of the day, the intention for the shoreline guidance document was for the decision makers. So when the Tanaha get 150 referrals on Kootenay Lake in 1 year, they actually have a method to process these to ensure that their values are being protected. Likewise for the province and the other agencies. So yeah, I hope that answers your question. It is out there. It's on the interactive web map, but the document is not an easy read. It's pretty dense. It's pretty complex. It's not really made for the layperson.
So I've got a couple more questions here. One from Councillor Lockenberg, one from Councillor Page.
Thanks, Mayor. Claire, can you specifically explain what that $2,000 is for that you're asking?
Yeah, it would be for funding my wages to coordinate quarterly compliance and enforcement committee meetings, and then quarterly Kootenay Lake partnership meetings. And then since the so those are two key things. It's just like facilitating, coordinating those meetings, a total of 8 meetings between the two committees. And then also specifically, since the inception of the Kootenay Lake Partnership, we haven't done strategic planning. So it would also be to support a strategic planning initiative, so we can kind of recalibrate how to tackle this how do we tackle this continued shoreline loss despite having the shoreline guidance document? So those are really the key pieces that we're hoping for this $2,000 contribution is coordinator wages to facilitate the partnership meetings as well as the compliance and enforcement committee meetings, and then the strategic planning for the partnership.
Thank you.
Councillor Page.
I just want to check with you, based on the conversations of the shoreline guidance document having the various cultural values in it now, is it fair to say that with the partnership not including the Sinaiaks, that their cultural sites are or are not included in that shoreline guidance document?
They're not included. The cultural values study was just Tanaha, and the archaeological overview assessment was just Tanaha. So if like the Sinaiaks would like to do their own cultural value study and their own archaeological assessment, it will be a separate study.
But that would, supplementally, that would be an issue, perhaps bringing that into the shared document or the shared work, so there was only one place to look for that kind of stuff?
That is definitely something that is in conversation right now with the partnership. It's unknown how that is going to be integrated. The information in terms of there are three pieces that make up the shoreline guidance document. The ecological piece and all that layer, it's my understanding that that information is freely shared, so that if the Sinaiaks would like to integrate that, they don't have to reinvent the wheel with that. That's all done. But in terms of doing the Sinaiaks cultural values study, that really is a separate study. How it gets integrated into a shoreline guidance document so that as decision makers on the lake, you have all the Indigenous relevant information in one place. We're still tackling how to figure that out. Like, that's a bit of an unknown.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, seeing no further questions, I really want to, you have another question?
I was just going to move to refer this to.
Well, it sounds like from what Claire said that this will be coming to us with something that Natalie has already on deck,
good.
so.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah, sorry, can I ask one quick question?
Sure.
So I'm not very familiar with like the proper protocol to submit a request. I can definitely work with Natalie on this, but will she know that, how to do that?
Yes. Yeah, Natalie does know how to do
Okay.
that. So what Councillor Lockenberg wanted to do was to refer this to staff to contemplate coming back. This is a committee of the whole meeting. We don't make any business decisions at this meeting. So it would go back, it would go to the appropriate staff person to write us a referral for, I always get it wrong. Anyways, so that it comes back to a business meeting. So if you're working with Natalie, then it will come in front of us at a future business meeting, so.
Okay, and then if you guys have any follow-up questions, like, definitely feel free to reach out. Natalie's our point person, and she said if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to her as well.
That's perfect. It's good that we have somebody on staff that can answer a few questions. So, so we want to thank you for your time, Claire. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'm looking out your window and I'm thinking you do live somewhere in Nelson. It looks like I can see Elephant Mountain.
I'm actually at my office in New Denver. I live up in the bush.
Oh, you live up in the bush. I was going to say, that looks like I can see the mountains back there. It's a lovely evening.
New Denver.
Yeah.
Nice to see you, Claire.
Well, thanks for having me. Thanks, Jesse. And thank you for your time tonight. I really appreciate that.
Okay.
Right on. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay. And then moving on. It's the outdoor night kind of. So Lisa, come on up. So our next delegation this evening is Lisa Thompson from WildsafeBC Nelson is presenting an update to City Council of WildSafe activities and findings from the 2022-2023 season, as well as work and initiatives planned for 2024. So welcome back, Lisa. We haven't seen you since last year, and hopefully we'll Well, you know, it's kind of one of those things, do I say, hopefully we'll see you around a lot, but maybe it would be better if we didn't?
Well, yeah, that's true. But you probably will be seeing a lot of me, quite truthfully.
Yeah.
So.
No, I mean, you're always at the market and things like that, so that's, you know, when you have those opportunities, it's great to be out there talking with our community members. So I will turn it over to you, and how would you like, do you want to take the questions as they come, or would you like us to hold until the end?
Oh, whatever pleases everyone. So
But we'll see how it goes. So you start and we'll see how the hands come up.
yeah, I think it's going to be short and sweet for this one, but yeah, I'm happy to take questions at the end. So thank you for having me this evening, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you all about the WildSafeBC 2023 season. And just as a reminder that WildSafeBC is the provincial leader in preventing conflict with wildlife through collaboration, education and community solutions. And I believe we are the preferred partner for the City of Nelson in doing so. And the Nelson program coverage, it does include within the city limits of Nelson, as well as the RDCK area E and F. So my coverage is basically from Ainsworth along the west arm of the Kootenay Lake that incorporates the North Shore, Harrop Proctor and Bonington, and down to Beasley and Blewett. And we operate on the unceded territory of the Sinaiaks and the traditional territory of the Kootenay and the Silix peoples. We bring this up every season just to clarify some terms that can be misconstrued. So when we talk about human-wildlife conflict, we use the words human habituated. So that's when wildlife becomes less fearful of humans in urban areas. And this is a learned response or behaviour. And we are most definitely seeing that within the City of Nelson, where a lot of people are becoming complacent and they're, you know, oh, look, there's a bear hanging out in my backyard. And it's like, well, we need to, perhaps consider scaring them along, like opening up a window and shouting at them and going, hey, bear, get out of here, and not allowing them to be comfortable in and around urban areas. And the other term is food conditioning. So this is when wildlife become reliant on human-generated food sources. And again, this is a learned behaviour that can be taught to offspring. So if we have a sow with cubs of the year or yearlings, and she's getting into garbage, then her offspring are going to be doing that as well. And unfortunately, when cubs are conditioned to human food sources, then they will ultimately meet the same fate as the sow if she becomes aggressive or protecting food sources or breaking into premises or entering homes. And together with human habituation and food conditioning, it increases the risk of human-wildlife conflict, which can lead to safety concerns for both the community and our wild animals that we have around here. So last year was another unprecedented season. There were not any black bears that were extinguished due to human-wildlife conflict. There were 2 bears that were dispatched due to injury. One, I believe, had fallen out of a tree and had a spinal injury, and another was hit by a vehicle just out of town, and conservation officers had to dispatch those animals for humane reasons. In terms of unprecedented moments, a grizzly family of 3 did arrive in the uphill mountain station area that were feasting on the abundance of apple trees up there. And for grizzly bears, in their traditional range, they don't have access to fruit trees because, during white settlement, we planted fruit trees in and around our homes here in Nelson, and our ancestors didn't, go up the mountain and plant fruit trees because it was too far away. So grizzly bears are a backcountry bear, so they're not accessing fruit and nut trees traditionally. And when they get a taste of it, it's pretty much like a kid in a candy store. This is high calorie foods for them, and they're just like wanting to just go to town, so to speak, on all the fruit trees. And both Gyro Park and the rail trails were closed due to bears last year.
Councillor Woodward.
Thank you.
Yep.
So I've lived in this town a long time, and last year felt really different with the amount of bears in town.
Right.
And it was incredible that none were destroyed, but they were living in Gyro Park and on the rails and trails, and we closed those and just kind of cohabitated with bears. Now, I was at a conference in Whistler, and they also kind of cohabitate. There are bears crisscrossing Whistler area, fairly common situation. I'm just kind of wondering, like, where we're going. I mean, it seemed like last year was pretty exceptional, just all of a sudden be living with bears. Was it? I mean, was it an exceptional year in that sense, or was there a berry issue in the high mountains? Like, what's happening here?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I do touch on it a little bit further on. However, the difference with Nelson and Whistler is that, Whistler is bear smart. They do not have curbside collection for their garbages, so that is a huge proponent of reducing their human-wildlife conflict. It is a very large, essentially a tourist town, and they do have lots of visitors and a revolving door of international residents as well. So I think the biggest difference is the bears are less prone to becoming food conditioned to garbage because of those reasons where they don't have curbside collection.
So, I guess, is what supplemental, Mayor?
Sure.
Is this the new reality for us, that we'll just be living with bears? I mean, it seems like a choice between not destroying bears and then we live with bears, destroying bears and not living with bears. It feels kind of binary that way, but is that so too simple to think of it that way, or?
It's difficult to say. If you ask someone 20 years ago or 30 years ago, did we have this many bears in town? Then the answer is probably no. However, were we managing our garbage a lot better back then, or did we have less garbage? Because I know as a child, although I didn't grow up in Canada, in Australia, we never threw out food waste. It's like, you're eating everything on your plate, and, if we did have leftovers, then that was utilized in some way. So there was less garbage going out. Additionally, Nelson wasn't as big as what it was back then as well. So, the interface there's always been an interface with bears and other wildlife here. It's just that now, because of, perhaps decades of inaction or just, burying heads in the sand, so to speak, have created this. And we know the black bear population is increasing. We have something to the tune of 160,000 black bears in BC versus perhaps 15,000 grizzly bears. So, and that comes down to mating cycles as well. Grizzly bears are more maternally invested, so their offspring stay with the sow for, 3, maybe 4 years, whereas black bears, they're with their mum for 1 year, and this is prime time now where we are seeing displaced black bears because mum's out mating and she's kicked them to the curb, and they're only 18 months of age, so they're kind of kids running amok and pushing boundaries. So I feel like I probably have gone off the answer somewhat on that.
It seemed a little shocking, I guess, just to have that last year. In a good way. I mean, it was great. There were no bears destroyed, but it was all of a sudden there was just bears.
Right, and I think there's going to be a continued cycle. If you think about the number of bears that were dispatched in 2022, then that now opened up a whole other territory for other bears to come down. So, maybe this year or next year we will see a repeat of 2022 because we're going to have bears coming down for the attractants that we have on offer here and fill in those gaps of where those bears that were destroyed have now vacated. So I think with all the factors, with climate change, with, not having bear-proof containers everywhere and people not storing their attractants or managing their attractants appropriately, every year I feel like is going to be an unprecedented season until we lock down what is attracting them. And although the bears will still come into town, if they're not gaining food rewards, then they're going to move on. If we're not being complacent and being like, oh, look how cute the bear is, in my fruit tree, and not out there going, get out of here, And last year was a decent berry season. And also, allowing conservation to be able to patrol illegal harvesting of wild berries. And I think Claire Payton of the Kootenay Lake Partnership highlighted the importance that the RAP line isn't just for reporting, wildlife. Our conservation officers have such a vast range of duties that don't just preclude to wildlife management. And I think that was a good highlight that she pointed out in her presentation.
Thank you.
Councillor Lockwood.
Yeah.
So I was just doing a quick little stats review on number of attacks and then, heaven forbid, number of people killed by black bears in North America. And it turns out it's incredibly rare. Like, I think one death in 2023 in all of North America, none in 2022, and so on. And then, and as far as the number of attacks, that black bear to human attacks in British Columbia, also incredibly rare. So I wonder, is there some sense that we might be overreacting somewhat to, certainly in euthanizing black bears, like as our kind of, what seems to be kind of almost our first response is, if they're in the area, if they seem to be habituated somewhat, we euthanize them. Is there not a chance that we're overreacting somewhat and we can kind of adopt a more measured approach?
Quite possibly, yes. I mean, can I answer that question completely? That would probably be a question for the Conservation Officer Service. I work closely with our local officers, and I have faith in them and their decision making. And yes, there are policies and protocols in place that they need to check off. And there's levelling of bears. So, for instance, last week when they had to dispatch one of the black bears, that was considered a level 3. And at level 3, a bear is, breaking into homes or sheds or garages, entering homes, whether it's an unlocked door or forcibly, and they're also exhibiting aggressive behaviour in terms of protecting their food source. So whether, and a lot of people feel like it may be a knee-jerk reaction because they've not seen those reports leading up until there's action from conservation. And I get those reports. URSA sometimes gets reports like that. The conservation officers certainly do. And so with that, if the conservation officer service is to allow that bear to progress through a level 4 or a level 5, then, you know, we would be seeing more injuries and more attacks. However, it's their job to protect the safety of the community, and unfortunately, that comes down to a bear is a predator. It's a top of the food chain for a reason, and they can inflict serious harm and or death on people. Whether we know how many of those reports have come through, I'm sure there's been minor attacks throughout BC that just aren't getting reported. And you know, if someone was to be fatally injured, then the Conservation Officer Service would come under scrutiny regardless. So it's a fine line. But I have trust and faith in our local conservation officers. I trust them that they're making the right calls, and I know for a fact that they don't like doing what they have to do, because this is a problem that's been created by other people, and unfortunately it's their job that they have to then clean up the mess.
If I may, a supplemental.
Yes, Councillor Blackburn.
So I understand conservation officers are following the policy, and of course, if that's the policy is this sort of graded level of severity and it hits that objective measure as far as they can judge it, then they have to respond. Granted. So I'm actually speaking about the policy itself. If it's maybe too aggressive in grading these bears, and then potentially the actual remedy, like euthanization, as being, because I know relocating bears is difficult and it's challenging, and yet is there not something that, granted the attractants, number one, continue to manage the attractants, but I'm talking about, like, if that didn't work, as it necessarily hasn't worked as well as we might have liked, could we not consider relaxing that policy, as well as looking at the euthanization as the remedy, being so quick to euthanize as policy, not speaking to conservation officers, but as the policy to euthanize, as opposed to maybe investing more money on other remedies?
Yeah, I mean, certainly that is definitely way above my pay grade, and definitely way above yours. And I don't have access to their specific protocol. And I mean, I certainly cannot comment on the policies or the protocol of the provincial government. And you know, there are calls for it to be reviewed, and whether or not that will happen. So yeah, unfortunately, I can't really comment on that.
That's helpful. I just want to thank you that, because that might give us some direction to advocate for a review of those policies to our.
And we know with relocation of black bears is research has shown that it doesn't work. They end up coming back to an urban area where they can gain food rewards, or they come back to the exact same place. And doing that for, you know, maybe 160,000 black bears is quite a lot. And you're also putting them in a state of stress. It's like, you know, perhaps, you know, we come into your house at night and sedate you, blindfold you, and toss you in the back of a truck and take you out to whoop there, and you wake up dazed and confused, and now you're having to fend for yourself. So that's quite traumatic on them, and it is considered inhumane, and they're subject to being predated upon by grizzlies or wolves or cougars and such. So, and with grizzly bears, as I said, they are more of a conservation priority because they do breed far less, and they are a keystone species, especially here in the Kootenays. So they're a priority when it comes to attempting relocation than black bears.
Councillor Payne.
I just want clarity around the no black bears were destroyed. I thought I remembered reading in the newspaper in November that there was a young black bear that was killed? Was that in
There,
Nelson? Was that not correct?
no, I don't think it was in November. There was one in January, which was over
Okay, so
the
that
course
counts as
of-
this year then.
of-
Okay, got
Yeah,
it.
that
Thank you.
did not go to Den.
Okay,
It was the brown black bear. So
so in January.
she was dispatched, I believe, mid-January for humane reasons. She was not in good condition and concerns for her health.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So just touching on some details about the grizzly bear family that arrived. There was a sow. Her 2 sub-adult cubs were accompanying with her, and the feral apple trees above Mountain Station were definitely what they were in town for. They predominantly moved around from dusk to dawn and stayed out of way of people. There were many reports of them being chased by local dogs and people encountering them when they, came out of their houses or whatever. But those reports were somewhat favourable because they moved on and they tried to avoid people. So in essence, they were good bears. And the ministry's carnivore biologist visited from Cranbrook, and I assisted him with scouting their locations and their sightings with the plan of trapping them and relocating them. And after many days, we found, and various attempts of moving traps, we were able to trap the 2 cubs overnight. And the sow mum was too smart. She didn't take the bait, quite literally. She didn't take the bait, and she needed to be tranquilized the following morning when we came up upon the traps. And all of that went safely and smoothly, and was somewhat successful with relocating them out of town, but within their home range. However, the apple trees were just beckoning for the taking by this grizzly bear family, and they returned. So it was decided amongst the biologist and the Conservation Officer Service to monitor the situation and allow those bears to continue based on their behaviours, and eventually, without incident, they went to Den up and around the 6 Mile Basin. The sow was tagged and radio collared, and the boys were ear tagged only. So as of these past few days, the sow has departed from the boys, and there's a rather large male grizzly bear kind of sniffing around and chasing her around at the moment. So hopefully, fingers crossed, none of them come back in the fall for our fruit trees. And just in terms of the Gyro Park closure, we actually had to close that because there were up to 7 black bears seeking what we think is refuge in the park, given that it was around the same time as the grizzly bears. So if you recall, the grizzly bears were kind of like Mountain Station and the cemetery, so they were kind of patrolling that upper area of Nelson that didn't allow for the black bears that were down here to actually escape, because we know black bears and grizzlies do come into conflict, and grizzlies will kill black bears. So and then there was reports of 2 black bears that had denned in Gyro Park over the winter, and there were reports of black bears accessing unsecured garbage around the Gyro Park area and neighbourhoods. about a few weeks ago, I actually put a bearing area sign at Gyro Park with reports of the bears back in there. And I removed it just the other day, and 2 days later, I'm getting reports that there's bears in there. A sow with cubs of the year as well. So you try.
Councillor Pinero.
Is it normal for a den to be in an area that small and that sort of central to people and noise and whatnot, and that low down? Is that like a normal black bear behavior, or was that a result of being stuck there for longer than normal or something like that?
It could be a result of them just kind of being stuck there, and that's where I think these bears were younger bears, so they felt safe together. Whether or not they were siblings, it's hard to know. And yeah, it was a sense of security for them there. They knew there was food sources around. And there are some parts of Gyro Park that isn't easily accessible by people. So for a Nelson bear, it's probably not going to be too uncommon, but for black bears, like even the years previous, we've had black bears den underneath people's houses in town. So it's where they feel safe and comfortable. That's why they choose.
Return to the same spot every year? Or is that going to be a thing now that those two bears are going to live in Gyro Park?
Most often, we know grizzlies choose a new den every season. Sometimes with black bears they do, and sometimes they don't. So it will be a case of just waiting to see, and then allowing the authorities to decide what's to be done to prevent this from reoccurring. Okay. Our activities last year included door-to-door campaigns, so that has me knocking on people's doors, chatting to them about attractant management, and that is complaint-driven as well as on the request from our conservation officers, and also from my own canvassing on social media and chatting with people. And last year I visited 513 homes, which was about half of what I visited the year previously, and I think it's just because we didn't have a lot of activity. This year I'm only 3 weeks in, and I'm already at almost 200 houses that I've visited. We, during the fall, schools invite us into their classrooms to chat with the youth about what they can do at home and wildlife safety. And we had 9 events over the course of the fall, and I presented to 430 students in Nelson. That's always a lot of fun, lots of stories as well. And with bin tagging, so that has me driving around the streets and the alleyways of Nelson. The night before bin collection, I did a total of 7 outings, which resulted in 43 bins being tagged that were out. There was also a moment where I was driving down an alleyway following a black bear, and he kept turning around looking at me, and I was like, dude, gotta get out of here. So we're both cruising for garbage, but for different reasons. And then he thought he got rid of me, and he snuck into a yard, and then I was there going, I can see you, and he wandered out and ran off. So that's always fun. And then with our booths at Kootenay Creek Park or at community events, I chatted to about 750 people over the course of the season. So that's always a lot of, chatting with people and lots of bear stories as well. But it's great.
Can I ask you, are people fairly receptive? Like, do they understand? Like, particularly if you're chatting with somebody who puts their garbage out in advance of garbage day, or do you have that many interactions with people that aren't kind of following the rules, and it's just other general people that are interested that are probably following the rules? I mean, how do those interactions go with people?
It's definitely a mixed bag, particularly with community events. I have people visiting the booth that are also outside of Nelson, lots of interested visitors that just want to know what they can do and, you know, how to be safe, and lots of residents that are wanting to share a story about a neighbour that's not compliant. So that's all kept anonymous when I do knock on those doors. So there's never the same conversation with the people that visit the booths. So yeah.
I guess I was thinking more about when you knock on the door of
I've been blatantly lied to on a number of occasions, and I you know, have photographic evidence of, you know, non-compliance and the, oh no, that's not us. So you know, just you gotta take it with a grain of salt, right. And try to educate and have those people remedy their practices. And if I go back and follow up and there's continued non-compliance, then that's when our local bylaw officers pay them a visit with their coupons.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Two questions. Mm-hmm. Are we doing enough downtown with the garbage bins? Should we do better?
Most definitely, okay. Yes. Shall I elaborate?
Yeah.
Yeah,
please.
Great. That's one of the biggest complaints that I get, that, you know, people are saying there's bylaws in place, but the City of Nelson isn't adhering to their own bylaws. And there's open concrete container garbage bins, right? And I know the city has installed all those bear-proof bins in the parks and that, but there are still so many that are continue to be accessed by bears, and you know, even recently, probably the bear that was dispatched last week was getting into a city can on Baker Street. I've had countless photos of sent to me from a bear getting into the open container that's outside of the courthouse there along Baker Street, and there was a recommendation a couple of years ago by WildSafe to decommission those bins. I know there's a lot of other aspects that come into planning and town planning, but it's imperative that those bear-proof bins get installed as soon as possible, and all of those open containers be decommissioned, hopefully by the end of the season.
Okay.
So yeah.
I have a question.
I think Councillor Payne
got one more.
had a
If you
follow-up,
can-
and then Councillor Tate.
I'm okay with that being now, and we'll see how the summer progresses. The other question is, on the enforcement side, on the commercial, are bylaws strong enough and providing enough opportunity to bring compliance into order when it needs to? Or do we have enough tools in our bylaws to?
You definitely have enough tools in your bylaws for bylaw enforcement. And that came down to the bear hazard assessment that was done, I think, in 2013, and bylaws were adjusted. Failing that, if bylaw steps in and the businesses remain non-compliant, then that's when you would have conservation officers come in under the Provincial Act, BC Wildlife Act. So I'm trying to get all of the dumpsters in town to have a bear bar across those dumpsters and not with the plastic lids. However, the providers of that aren't easily contactable and easily amendable to that. So I'm calling upon businesses to reach out to their waste providers and say, hey, can we switch out our bins for, or install those bare bars across the top?
So that would be a place where I would ask the bylaw question, can we regulate that and say you have to use those kinds of bins? Is that
Quite
reasonable?
possibly. I'd have to look back at your specific bylaws relating to businesses.
Yeah.
But failing that, I'm sure you could pass a new one stating that.
Okay.
Councillor Tate and then Councillor Payne.
Is that on the work plan, the bare bins on Baker, now that the parks are done? I forget.
Not until we were doing the Baker Street redesign.
Oh, okay. Okay. Thanks.
Councillor Payne.
I guess my question's pretty specific. The Chamber of Commerce is having a waste management seminar tomorrow from 11 till 1. Did they invite you to attend that?
No, I did not get an invitation to that.
It's more from an environmental perspective, but it just seems like a perfect opportunity for you to be there. So maybe I'm mistaken in what's there, but I'll let you know if there's anything. I'm going.
Okay, great. Appreciate it.
Sounds like you can go crash.
Yeah. I'll share my lunch.
I can't make too many waves here.
Waves, we like waves.
Really do.
Some of us do.
I have been, slapped on the wrist previously. Moving on to collaborations. So last season, it was amazing to collaborate with Public Works, where on my door-to-door campaigns and canvassing campaigns, I came across a number of feral fruit trees, and I couldn't distinguish whether or not they were on public land or private land. And when I knocked on the door to the residents, they're like, no, that's not my land. So I reached out to Public Works, and they were quick to identify that they were actually on public land, and pretty much within that week they had them removed, which was splendid. And I believe all the fruit trees that were removed last season are planned to have non-food bearing native trees planted in place. So that was awesome.
Councillor Lockenberg has a question.
Can I ask a question about the feral fruit trees? I'm trying to understand our vision here for what we're hoping to achieve in the best case scenario. So imagine that the food cycler program rolls out, people are dealing with their organics so that the waste that's going to the curb has no attractants in it. We've got bear-proof bins everywhere, and the ICI sector is solid. They're controlling their waste, and yet we have fruit trees all over the place. Is the goal to then, and we'd be still attracting bears into the community? Is at that point we're saying, well, they're now a part of, like, we accept it, like that we've done the human interaction part as far as fruit trees go? Because imagine you had a big huckleberry crop on the interface, and so the bears were coming through to the community. We'd then push into the interface and start clearing out the huckleberries, like, because we've had before us an issue, or I hesitate to say a request, but essentially a request for funding around cutting down fruit trees. And this is really tough because that goes counter to our food security strategy. We want to promote, agriculture and fruit trees and all the rest of it. And in the case of some of these cases, it might have been the current homeowner has been letting their trees on their property go, but they sell. The next owner loves it and starts. So to cut them for one owner just takes them out for a generation or beyond. So it does get us to this place. Like, I can imagine a time, say 15 or 20 years, less, let's say 5 years, where the garbage is solid. We've buttoned that down, but we have fruit trees everywhere. And so we have the same number of bears in the community. At that point, do we say, that's just the way it is? And we're not, and do I have that picture drawn right, or would we still be considering the bears a problem in that circumstance?
Well, with that circumstance is that, yes, let's say that the city of Nelson is, zipped up in terms of bears not being able to access any human-generated garbage whatsoever. And everyone is, bird feeders are banned all year round. People aren't feeding their pets outside. All of those types of attractants, right? Yes, they're going to still come down for fruit trees, but are they going to be killed because of that? Maybe, maybe not, but they're not getting into garbage, right? They're not then becoming problem bears. They will probably protect their food source. I've seen bears that, kind of huff and gruff and, warn people away from fruit trees, and so that's protecting a food source. So we'll probably still be seeing that, but there may be less bears being killed because they're not getting into garbage. So in one of the bylaws is that residents who have fruit and nut trees are meant to maintain them, harvest them, clean up their windfall and manage them appropriately so that bears, wildlife, rats, skunks, raccoons aren't just having a free-for-all from the windfall. And because rats come for the fruit that's on the ground, the skunks come for the rats, the raccoons come for the rats, the bears come for the fruit trees. So it's just this continued cycle. And, removing the feral fruit trees that are on public land, these are trees that aren't being taken care of, is definitely a good step. And, even visually pleasing, because you're not driving through busted crab apples and getting your car all stained up or the streets stained up or whichever. I know I've been trying to work on funding, securing funding for the elderly or those people that are challenged with managing their fruit trees to have them pruned. URSA has some funding to as a cost share for removing unwanted fruit trees in and around town. So I'm sure they'll make some announcement to that effect at such time. And I've chatted with the RDCK directors about helping people out financially with those people that don't want fruit trees, aren't financially able to pay someone to remove them, or elderly or disabled and can't manage their fruit trees. So fruit trees are the second highest attractant reported for black bears.
Sorry.
I just wanted to talk about trees and then I'll go back. Does that include the nut trees or is that just totally just fruit?
The nut trees as well. Because they're an introduced species, fruit trees, right? And nut trees, we only have in BC the beaked hazelnut that is native to BC. So these are all introduced over the last few hundred years.
Right. Councillor Lockwood.
So so just so I'm understanding again, then I'm imagining, if we sort of proceed along our competing goals of food security, where we're like actively supporting and encouraging the development of homegrown, locally grown food, including and maybe in particular fruit and fruit trees, but other things, berries and other crops that would attract bears. So we're having a bustling harvest, and inevitably in that there's going to be, some people that do it well, some people that don't. I struggle with trying to figure out how we balance that, and if we're then going to say, okay, well, we've got to start cutting down trees, and that did come before us, and I think this council's very hesitant about that. Like that goes against, although it's advancing this, it's going against that. Then we're going to tell people, okay, no more bird feeders, and then managing feeding animals outside. it feels like we're potentially, there's no effective solution in managing attractants overall. And in that case, it begs the question, in my mind, is the amount of attractants then, does that correlate to the number of bears? Or if there's just sort of a minimum threshold, like if you've got this much attractants, then you're going to get this many bears, because they're broadly supported by the larger ecosystem. This is just one source. So the actual amount of attractants is kind of irrelevant up to a point. So you're still going to get the same attractants if you've got the fruit trees in here. So all of this effort we might be doing might in the end be for naught. So it might be helpful to have that perspective so that we can not, so we can just sort of choose the right set of policies and approaches that actually move the needle. If you see what
Right, and I mean, fruit trees are always controversial. No one wants to cut down trees, and yet we cut down trees. But with that is the amount, the Kootenays are overran with fruit trees, feral fruit trees that aren't managed. People have sentimental value because they're like, oh, it's, my great grandma's tree, or this tree's 100 years old. And with that, if we are able to reduce the amount of feral fruit trees or trees that aren't being appropriately managed because no one wants to, or food harvest programs are just inundated with trying to manage these trees, right? And people are like, oh, I want someone to come and get rid of my fruit, like I don't want it, it's too hard for me to take care of. We're in essence artificially increasing the population of black bears, because there's an abundance of this food that is in and around here in our urban interfacing. And if, mating seasons now, so with black bears, they mate, but the female won't implant that embryo until she goes to den. And if she's in great condition, then she's going to implant those embryos. And if she's like a huge, well-conditioned bear, then she might have 3, 4, possibly 5 cubs that following year. Whereas if she didn't have 50, 70, 100 fruit trees that she was feeding from, then maybe she would only have 1 to 2 cubs. So that needs to be taken into consideration as well. And that also comes down to artificially increasing rats and skunks and raccoon populations, because they rely, well, not necessarily rely, but fruit trees and the windfall is so easy for them to access in and around here. So personally, I have fruit trees on my property, and my landlord is amazing. She gets the pruners in every spring and cuts them back, and I manage them. It's a lot of work, especially when the bears are busy here in Nelson. It takes a lot of time away from what I have to take care of in my own yard. But I make it work, and a lot of people just aren't willing to invest in putting the effort in and meeting those responsibilities that they have to the local wildlife. Hopefully that answers.
Yeah, no, that was really helpful.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Great. Okay, I'll just quickly burn through here, if that's okay.
I just was going to talk
Yeah.
about, don't orchards have like electric fences and that sort of thing to keep wildlife out?
Some do.
Okay.
Outside of the city of Nelson,
Yes.
there is an electric fence co-share option with the RDCK for those that wish to protect their fruit trees during bear season. But as you know, electric fencing is not permitted within city limits.
It's not, I know. Yeah.
But we don't have any orchards either here.
Well, have you
But
seen
we're
some people's
planning
backyards?
ahead for 5 years and 10 years and 15 years.
When you talk, as I remember as a child, because I've been here so long, is that whole area up above Mountain Station was completely fruit trees. I mean, the Ducabors, the reason we had a building called the Jam Factory is they actually made jam in the jam factory. So that whole hillside, because I'm on the bear track, I get to see
Right,
them
yep.
quite often up where I live. That was all fruit trees, historically. I mean, and it was like, until I built my house, I still had probably 7 or 8 fruit trees in my yard, just because I was in that proximity to the hillside. But building a house removed all the fruit trees. Yeah.
I'd like a couple of fruit trees to not be on in my yard, but my dogs love them too, so they usually get to them before the bears do. As you're aware, WildsafeBC were in partnership with the City of Nelson Organics Department to help promote and roll out the food cycler program. Personally, I love my food cycler, and I've had a number of conversations with residents about the efficacy and how it can help manage attractants and reduce organic waste to be picked up curbside as well. So, and then also the Ursa project and I joined forces during the rail trail closures with the grizzly bears that were in town. So I definitely appreciated their help, because even though I hit up 100 homes in one day, I definitely needed more assistance with getting the word out and having people report where the grizzlies were in order to help the biologists locate them and safely relocate them.
We are working with Ursa, the City of Nelson, Ursa, to sell bear-proof pens too.
Yeah, yeah.
So.
And that was something that WildSafe had discussed with the city in past years, but never eventuated. So I'm glad something is happening. Here is a picture of one of the feral fruit trees that in Rosemont that was removed. It was a crabapple tree, and here we have a black bear on just up from Nelson PD on Silica at around about 2 p.m. on a weekday. So I came around the corner and I had to stop, and I was like, get out of here, and everyone's out there with their cameras. So lastly, just for this season, our 2024 initiatives, that we will continue to celebrate and embrace community Bear Smart projects. Additionally, we will continue to support the Organics Diversion Food Cycle program, and support the bear-resistant garbage container availability to residents. And as we recommend every season, to consider increasing curbside garbage collection to weekly during higher conflict months. And as we discussed earlier, continue to install bear-resistant bins within the communities, as well as the school districts. That is also a big concern for parents, as well as students in the school districts. And I'm pleased to say that the Kootenay Lake Tourism had secured some grant money for bear-resistant bins around the Kootenay Lake region, and a number of those bins are actually going into school districts. So that's good. Continue to build the WildsafeBC Business Pledge Program. This is where we have local businesses pledge to help reduce human-wildlife conflict and secure and manage their attractants. Last year, we signed the Hume Hotel, additionally the Kootenay Co-op, which were great, and I hope to continue to grow that program to the businesses. And this year, the Bridge FM has pledged that they will do right by the wildlife and the community, and we've signed them up. And then lastly, the fruit and nut tree management through shared harvesting programs, or source funding to promote removal of unwanted food-bearing trees.
Is that a pun? Sorry.
Unwanted
For bearing trees.
Yeah.
There you go.
I got to get it in when I can. So thank you to the RDCK, the City of Nelson, the British Columbia Ministry, and the BC Conservation Foundation, as well as the Columbia Basin Trust as our sponsors. And finally, I would just like to let you know that we've had significant funding cuts this season from the CBT as well as the ministry. So that does affect how I will be planning the season program. And hopefully head office has been able to source more funding for us. So the hours have essentially been halved for this program this season.
So can you tell us what that comes down to, please?
For me, it will be from going from 36 hours a week down to 20 hours a week. And my priorities are now for predominantly door-to-door campaigns. I'm reducing the amount of public events that I'll be at, because I find with a lot of the booths, a lot of children come to check out things and talk and check out the bear pelts and the cougar pelts and the skulls and such. And I just find that I'm not having those conversations with homeowners and residents and visitors. So I kind of changed things up at a recent, the first farmers market of the season. And I actually had some really fantastic conversations with people visiting, and only a handful of kids. So the kids are great, but I gotta get the ear of the adults to help make a difference. So yeah, that's
Well, hopefully you can still provide the odd opportunity for those children to come, because actually,
of course,
sometimes we know that if the kids get home and can deliver the message, they're the subtle ones that kickstart the mom and dad into contemplating maybe trying something a bit different. So
yeah, and that's where I still have a number of dates out at Kootenay Creek Provincial Park. There's always lots of locals that visit that park, and we certainly won't be cutting down any time spent with the schools in fall with the Wildlife Rangers program, because that definitely makes a difference, and there are some smart kids out there, and
Thank you so much.
So thank you.
Councillor Payne has a question for you.
I have two separate questions. One is, I'm trying to understand, the last time I was involved in a harvest rescue program, the challenge that I heard, and maybe Jesse from the Nelson and NCFC? Nelson Community Food Center has more information recently, but the challenge was getting enough volunteers to pick the fruit. Has it progressed in a way that we could just notify people, like would there be a sign like, come and pick my fruit? So that I'd be walking down the street and go, oh, I need more plums for chutney, and could just take my basket and help myself. Because there is a feral fruit tree that I usually get my plums from that a bear.
Ursa had those signs
that's what I'm saying.
last
Did they do
year.
that? Okay.
And I can tell you, Leslie, from the city, that we don't endorse those kinds of signs, because you climb that tree, and if that says like the City of Nelson on it, and you fall out of the tree, guess who you sue? I mean, it's a little bit of there is some legalities,
I'm just trying to understand some method that we could better communicate to the public in general.
But Ursa has those signs, and they gave them out last year, because I actually picked up one of those signs for a friend.
Yeah, Ursa, I believe will be.
So they're not a city, they're not a city sign.
I get that. But food is food. Food is more expensive. If I don't have to pay for food and I'm not stealing it, and if someone says they have permission to, and I don't climb the trees to get my fruit either. If it's not low hanging enough, I don't take it. but.
I found success posting on Food Harvest because, yes, the Food Harvest program failed to have enough volunteers to do that. I'm working with the RDCK to see if people can dispose of their, rotten windfall fruit free of charge to the transfer stations instead of paying a fee. That's still in the works. But for me, Kootenay pie lady, she came in and picked a whole bunch of fruit and my neighbour's overhanging walnut tree. And I just posted on those Food Harvest Program Facebook pages like, hey, if anyone needs this, come help yourself. And I had probably 3 different parties come out to my place, and I'm out at 12 Mile Long Beach area, so it was a bit of a trek for some people, and that was a huge benefit. Less work for me. The food was going to people that needed it, and not going to waste. So a lot of it I suspect will be on ourselves making those,
and that's fine.
those posts.
I think we need to be responsible for ourselves and doing the best we can to, manage interacting with the other beings that live in our space. But my second question is, why don't we have electrification? Do other communities, Castlegar can electrify, can't they?
I'm not too sure about them, but if Caslow, they're allowed to have electric fencing. There's a lot of fruit trees on properties up there, particularly in the RDCK areas. A lot of people will just have their compost bin or area electrified, or the shed that they store their garbage in electrified. So I think there was some concern of, people having, livestock in town, like chickens and such, and electrifying them, or they're electrifying their space, so wildlife couldn't get to them. But as for it being a bylaw, I'm not too sure.
What's the history of that? Why? Is there a reason?
I would hazard that probably because we're an urban area and perhaps electrification when people have dogs and cats and other domestic animals is what comes to my mind, but I have no idea why we don't allow.
My dog's pretty smart. I'm sure one ping on the nose and she wouldn't go back there, but
Theirs learn pretty quickly, and I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, you only have to do it once.
Other animals will.
This is a significant problem. I think there's more than one way to do this. I'm a grower. I grow a lot of my own food. I do have my compost. I have so far not had problems because I don't know why. Just lucky, or I know how to compost. One of those two things. But I need that. That's material for me to grow my food.
Mm-hmm.
So I haven't needed to electrify because I haven't run into issues yet.
That's
but
good.
I think it could be an option because that is also waste that doesn't get carried anywhere.
Definitely.
Councilor Wood.
Thank you. So just on the Harvest Rescue piece, when I did work at the Nelson Community Food Center, the Harvest Rescue was a complex program to run because of having to get volunteers, having to get them to a location. There was a certain amount of danger factor, climbing around in trees. And so it is a fairly labor-intensive activity. And when the fruit would come back to the center to give away at the food bank, sometimes it was a huge amount, sometimes it was very small. And so it was very hit and miss. I can only imagine what would really make it work is where you'd actually have like a paid crew that would actually be, there would be a leader and a paid crew with the equipment they needed, and that's what they would do for the whole fruit harvesting season. Because volunteers, I can't see that, in the long run, for really for a very effective, efficient system of harvesting. I think you would have to probably pay people. And then of course, all that harvested food is great for the food banks.
Right. Yeah,
So
and
that-
local farmers as
or
well, and
Yeah. But I definitely think, just from my own experience, that if you wanted to do harvest rescue, you'd have to you have to grow that program. It would have to be pretty extensive and, well, it'd have to be paid. There are more steps there.
Oh, yeah,
To make
sure.
it actually effective.
Yep, definitely. I agree. My 20 hours a week won't cover that though.
No. And you have to have equipment. There's a whole bunch of equipment too.
Yeah.
There's all these ladders and these bags and
They have,
like
I
these
thought they had
pickers.
that.
And they have
Yeah.
some, but it's just, it was a small scale operation. And there's what you're talking about is a much larger piece. So anyways, that's my 2 cents.
Food prices are going up.
Yeah.
I get it free where I can. That's one place I can.
Councilors, any further questions for Lisa? On that note, thank you, Lisa, for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
I'm sure we'll all look forward to seeing you at a few of the markets and other activities around town. And know that you're welcome back if you have any updates. And perhaps we'll see you in the fall for sort of end of season wind up.
Yep, I believe I'm already scheduled for November 15th this
Okay,
year.
good.
And
I was thinking
yeah.
November you should be coming back, but just in my head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And feel free to pop in at any of the farmers markets or other booths that I have. And hopefully I don't have to knock on your door and leave a yellow tag. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you. Okay, council. We have no late items, so if I could ask for a resolution to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Woodward, seconded by Councillor Page. All those in favor? Oh, look at that, 5 hands tonight. Very good. Thank you. Thank you all for coming tonight. Thank you to our 2 presentations. I'm glad that we just had 2.
Presentators? Did you say
Yeah.